Witchy Wednesday Tarot Live. I'll do some announcements and let people filter in because today we're going to be continuing last week's reading style where I'm going to be picking cards for every sign in the zodiac. It'll be based off of your rising sign, and I'll be taking just a little bit of a glimpse at my handy dandy astrology wheel and my astro chart information to the side, just to kind of get some astrological corroboration, which is always fun and very validating, to be honest. And I sort of started doing this just kind of off the cuff for fun, but it's a nice little preview for some of what my Patreon subscribers get every month, which is a handwritten horoscope from me based on every rising sign, where I draw 3 tarot cards and then I look into the astrology of that month, and I give everybody a little sneak peek about what I see as far as the astro weather is concerned. And it's always really nice because the tarot readings really lend an element of specificity, and it really helps to kind of focus in on like what specifically, because everybody's sort of dealing with the same astro weather. So even though depending on how your natal chart is configured, it kind of hits you different, comes up in different places, different areas of your life. There's a lot of similarities, with these mundane transits when, when different planets go into different signs and they create aspects in the sky and things like that. So having the tarot cards there is a really great way to kind of hone in on what each rising sign specifically needs in that month to focus on. So it's been really fun to write, although they do take me a couple weeks to do. So it is quite a labor-intensive process. But also on my Patreon, I have tiers for like spell jars, for sigil archive access, for early access to sneak previews and podcast episodes, which yes, I am still writing, but I'm working on the podcast episode for the High Priestess, which is taking a very long time because it's one of my favorite cards and there's just so much to say about it. So anyway, I thought for those of you joining later, listening to this video, I would just throw a leg out there. I have a Patreon, so if you get any joy or fulfillment in what I provide here, or you just like to support an independent artist, an independent business, that's a great way to do it. And if not, you might direct people to it who might be interested. So anyway, as far as the Kickstarter goes, we're pretty much caught up. We've shipped out all the Canadian orders that we could. We've shipped out all of the normal orders. We're only waiting on those orders that have a wooden apothecary deck box or altar box. Those ones are still, we can only work as fast as the craftsperson gives us the boxes because he's making each one by hand. So it takes quite a bit. I hope I was successful in remaining very transparent about that from the very beginning through the Kickstarter, because that was definitely always a factor. So anyways, other than that though, the Children of Ostara Kickstarter is pretty much complete. We have gotten some orders returned to us due to shipping shenaniganery. So this weekend, or hopefully before that even, I'm going to be going through each of those return shipments, looking at the invoices inside and reaching out to everybody, seeing how they want to proceed going forward. But yeah, all of the orders have been successfully sent out, except for those getting a wooden apothecary deck box, because again, we have to wait for the craftsperson to continue to make them. I think we've got like 200 or something, including both box categories. So it's not bad for a Kickstarter that had like almost 2,000 people. So we've only got like 200 left. So that's not too bad. Anyway. So today I'm going to be drawing some cards for everybody in the zodiac. So if the chat wants to volunteer a deck, I think last time we used the Nameless one and Ostara. So using 2 decks again might be nice, but I am going to try to limit myself to only pulling 1 card from each deck, because last time it took me 4 hours to get through everybody, and a 4-hour live is that's a lot to ask people to sit through, and it was difficult for me too. So I'm going to try to really keep it down, but yeah, so I think that's all the announcements. I don't have very many announcements today, really. So yeah, do you guys want to see a specific deck used for this? Or, well, I guess we could just do the same ones as last time, or maybe we use Litha and Ostara, since before we used the Nameless one, although I don't know. I like seeing the Nameless one paired with the Children of the Wheel series. They're very different styles of decks, so it's fun to see. Oh, and again, I guess just for the sake of, the shameless plug that all small businesses must do, I am the illustrator, designer, creator of all of these decks and all of these products. So you can find this cool astrology wheel of the year on my website, xiahunt.com. You can also find both of these decks. So I guess if nobody has any opinions on which deck to use, we'll just I'll just pick one and we'll just get started, since I don't want to hold us up too long. Usually I have the chat decide which deck to use. But okay, I guess we'll just use, let's see, which deck should we use for our readings? I'm gonna go with the Children of, no, yeah, okay, I'm gonna do the Children of Litha and the Nameless One, because last time we did the Nameless One and the Children of Ostara. So we're starting off with Aries risings. So if you have an Aries rising, then this reading is for you, and if not, hopefully it's educational and gives you something else to work with. So this is a reading for Aries risings, and then we're going to go through the rest of the zodiac and figure out what you guys have got going on. It'll be interesting to note when we had to compare that with our last week's readings too. Okay, so all right, so I got that. Actually, I should. Okay. So we have the Four of Swords reverse. Oh, sorry, I was going to pull one from each card. I was going to pull one card from each deck. I already forgot what I was doing. Okay. So this is still for Aries rising. Oh, we got one right away. Oh my God. Okay, well, this doesn't exactly add too much of a difference, but this is the Four of Swords in the Children of Litha and the Four of Swords in the Nameless One. So Aries risings have a big Four of Swords week, I suppose, is what that means. I did say I was only going to draw 2 cards, so I'm going to try to stick with it so that our live is not 4 hours long. But let me go ahead and upright these cards for you so that you can see them, but they are both reversed, so that's going to be relevant to our reading. So Aries risings have the Four of Swords and the Four of Swords. Now, the Four of Swords is associated with the Jupiter decan of the zodiac sign Libra. And, sorry, I'm pointing to Gemini. Oh, man, I really need to drink my coffee. Libra's over here, but you can't really see it. There we go. Turn it over. So it's associated with the Jupiter ruled decan of the zodiac sign of Libra. Now, something that's interesting about that, Libra is ruled by Venus. Venus is the planet of love, beauty, value, harmony, social harmony, generally, but all kinds of harmony, natural cycles of harmony as well. And justice, because justice is essentially an ethics that is prescribed by a culture to maintain social harmony in those cultures or groups. So anyway, which, Libra is a great expression of Venusian justice, right? Because it's for harmony, it's for pleasure, and that's why Saturn is exalted in Libra, because sometimes rules help us to get along better, right? Surprise, surprise. Well, so anyway, when you have the Jupiter decan of Libra, a sign already ruled by the other benefic, by the lesser benefic, you have this kind of vibe where, like, classical depictions of this decan show either huge, crazy, jovial parties where it's just like people are going hog wild and like having an absolute rager, like a blast, or you see this kind of like solemn, quiet, reflective, pensive hangover moment after the party. So it's kind of like on these two things. And when you think about it, so Venus wants to say yes for the sake of diplomacy, and Jupiter wants to expand and get bigger, and Libra is an air sign, a social sign. So it's almost like saying yes to the party continuously for the sake of social harmony or social ease, right? It's sort of like, yeah, okay, I'll have another drink. Yeah, okay, I'll do another thing. Yeah, okay, I'll do this or whatever, and then it gets to a point where it becomes very loud and very active, and we need to kind of withdraw and recharge. And then this kind of, Jupiter has sort of 2 major modes. One is just general abundance, amplification, bigifying, as I say. He's the bestower of miracles, of luck, of blessings, of mirth, of joy, parties, all these fun things. But, it can get overdone, right? And so this other side of Jupiter happens to be more about spirituality, reflection, growing within, these kinds of things. And so Jupiter does typically, in addition to expanding, want to uplift. So at any rate, when we see the Four of Swords, we're talking about consciously and purposefully lowering our social, our mental guard for the sake of ease, for the sake of comfort, for the sake of reflection, relaxation, rejuvenation, that kind of a thing. And so this can be done with like conscious meditation, right? Actively removing yourself and trying to come to a center, come to a point of calm or of stillness. This can also be done chemically, right? Some people take antidepressants or stabilizing medications. Some people just indulge in social drinking to try to lower that mental guard that gives them that anxiety and that real that real dis-ease in social settings. So there's lots of different ways, some more or less healthy for, different individuals. But the Four of Swords often kind of comes up when, at least when it's upright, when there's that moment of quiet, right? We're letting our mental guard down, we're relaxing, we're processing the day, we're trying to kind of ease into something, and we need that quiet, pensive moment for reflection. So it is a swords card, and swords have to deal with the mind and with the intellect. And when they're upright, swords represent victory. They represent being on the offensive, being vigilant, being aware, being consciously guarded or protected. Swords are weapons, but weapons are used to protect and defend as well as they are to attack and to sever. And so we do see that ability in the mind, in the intellect, right? You can talk yourself down and calm yourself, just maybe not as easily, but just as readily as you can talk yourself up and get yourself really going or really motivated by, by thinking about something really intensely. So when when the Four of Swords is upright, we see all the swords are pointed down, right? Because this is a surrendering. This is making yourself more passive, whether it is through alcohol, friendship, meditation, drugs, whatever it is, that's what the Four of Swords kind of represents. And so it has this really big breath where, for this reason, like, okay, so these are poppies, right? Poppies are used for opium and opioids. And obviously we know that can get really intense, right? People can get really, it can happen, it can dwell into problematic territory, right? People get addicted. They can't, self-regulate. They need some external substance to do it. But in the correct dosage, right, in the correct circumstance, those same drugs, which can be used to absolutely ruin a person's life, can also be used to save it, to help it, right? Such as when we're recovering from an intense surgery and we need pain relief, such as when we have, ongoing struggles with depression. Some opioids are used in antidepressant medication. So if you're responsible and if you understand yourself and your needs, these things that can be used for ruin can also be used for uplifting, for the relief of pain, for the release of pain. And it's the same with alcohol, right? In small doses, it's fine to like have a drink with your friends and unwind. There's nothing wrong with that. But it can also get to a point where it's unsustainable. It's too much growth in that direction. It becomes too loud, too big. So generally speaking, the Four of Swords, when it's upright, tends to err on that calm, reflective, pensive, lowering of guard in a careful, intentional way. And sometimes it just means you need a rest, right? Things have been really hectic and you need to remove yourself and kind of allow yourself to decompress. But we got this card reversed. So when the Four of Swords is reversed, we see the swords themselves are actually pointed upright. So this is a re-energizing, if nothing else. Usually what I find is the reversed Four of Swords means that something is getting loud. So we're having a loud weekend, we're having a lot of stimulation, we're thinking about a lot of things, we're doing kind of the opposite polarity of what we would normally associate that card with. But the opposite thing is not just because, oh, reversals means opposite. That's not true. What we're really dealing with is the same essence energy, but now this is out of balance, out of whack. It's being pulled a little bit too far. Either before we were like too prone to enact, which since this reading is for Aries rising, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that's not the problem. Or it's more like, okay, we're really running on empty, right? We're really pulling ourselves and like trying to get more and more and more and more and more done. And we're reaching that point where whether we intentionally take a step back and try to upright these cards, try to take a reflective, pensive break from all of that energy and all of that excitement, or whether that happens to us because we get sick, we get hurt, we get hungover, whatever the situation may be, we're kind of approaching that crux. Usually when I see reversals, it's because the same energy, which can be productive and helpful, it's either blocked, it's misused, misdirected, or it's just out of balance, right? It's extreme in one way, too much or too little. I will pull one other card because it seems a little bit like, well, we got two cards twice. It really does reinforce that message. And Venus it's interesting too, because Venus in the sky right now, if you're an Aries rising, is in your rising sign. And so when things are on your rising, it tends to bring those things directly to your front door, so to speak, directly to you. Venus being there is really nice because we get moments of pleasure, moments of harmony, of social connection. We're maybe more charming than usual. We're maybe more social than usual. And so I think it's kind of interesting here that we're seeing this, like there's so much energy and it's maybe becoming very loud, right? Becoming very noisy. So at some point you probably will need to take that break, but we'll pull the other card and see. Oh, look at that. Yeah. So to me, this really just is like puts a fire under this under this very airy energy, right? There's a lot of social stuff going on. There's a lot of passion, a lot of motivation, a lot of new intensity, new intense drives or desires. It's really funny because I've been thinking a lot about the Ace of Wands in particular, in its capacity to represent motivation, and what motivation really is, and this feeling of that fire, right? It's fire is the animating life principle, the warmth of your skin that means you're alive. When people say, to light a fire under somebody is to give them a burst of motivation, usually by creating a kind of discomfort, but it can kind of be anything, right? To light a fire under somebody is to get them really energized and really motivated to act. And that essentially is what fire does, right? Fire gropes for the next branch. Fire consumes. Fire is very visual. You can see it. It's not shy about it, and it desperately needs to perpetuate itself by consuming more and more fuel. And this is probably an energy that Aries risings are very comfortable with because, like, yeah, fire sign, the first fire sign of the cycle. It's the cardinal, it's the leader. It wants to get up and move and drive. So at any rate, I've been thinking about the Ace of Wands as being like, this is the thing that actually compels you to take action in a direction, right? Because you can think about something, you can have the Ace of Swords, and you can have a new idea, new insight, new clarity, new truth, new vocalization, new communications, but you don't actually have to act on any of it, right? It's just like this new understanding when you have the Ace of Swords. When you have the Ace of Cups, you're like, oh, a new feeling, a new romance, a new social endeavor, something, new friendship, and whatever. There's this new big emotional outburst, right? But you don't have to act on your emotions either. A lot of the times those are also experienced very internally. When you have the Ace of Pentacles, because it's earth, it's material. So there could be an opportunity in like your job, in your career, your work. It could be a new tool that is given to you or that you're learning how to use. It could be just a new business opportunity, a new investment, right? Or a little bit of cash to start something bigger, some seed money, something like that. But again, having the resources does not necessarily mean you're going to act on it one way or the other, right? Seeing the opportunity doesn't necessarily mean you're going to go in it and be invested and let that drive you. So when you see the Ace of Wands, more so I would argue than any other ace, yeah, all aces are opportunities. They're quick, they're fleeting, they're powerful, they're very, they have a lot of potential. But more so than any other ace, when you see the Ace of Wands, that really gets you moving, right? It's the motivating, it's the animating. Go, okay, now we're acting. So when I see people talk about the Ace of Wands, people are like, oh, a new business venture. Because that's like, yeah, but that's kind of Ace of Coins. It's really like we're acting on a new business venture. We're starting a new adventure or journey in some direction because our motivation has reached that point where it becomes passionate, right? It becomes fulfilling, fueling, energizing. Sort of when I experience this card a lot because I'm an artist, right? So I make all of these tools and all of these decks. And when I have a new idea that's kind of this Ace of Swords, I'm kind of like, oh yeah, that could be cool. That could be interesting. I'll think about that. When I have a new business idea, a new business adventure, it's very much they're more like low key, I guess. When you get the Ace of Wands, though, that's like, oh, I am like madly desiring to do this thing, right? That's not just I have a new idea for a deck. That's like I'm at my desk sketching for like 20 hours straight, right? Because I'm very motivated. Like I feel that kind of welling up, that kind of that warmth, that energy, and that's something that the Ace of Wands really brings that you don't see in a lot of other places, to be quite frank, outside of the suit of fire. But that's kind of when I was starting out with tarot, anyways. The way that people described the element fire and branches was always a little bit like, well, it's not quite earth, it's not quite water, it's not quite air, it's this other thing, it's a spiritual thing, but it really is like this, it's this motivating thing is what it is. It's drive, right? It's whatever allows you to act on any of those other opportunities, that passion, that animating life force. So anyway, so when I see this, I see, wow, this is really busy. There's a lot of energy. We're really motivated to say yes, 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 more, 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 more. And perhaps lowering our mental guard in the context of this energy, it looks like, oh, yeah, there are reasons that I should stop and slow down and think about what I'm doing, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to keep going because it feels good, because people are encouraging me, because I'm not thinking at all, because I'm just acting on instinct, on impulse, which is another thing that the suit of wands can really bring to the table. It's not judgment like air, right? It's not sitting down thinking, weighing options. It's not, what can I do practically based on my material resources like earth? And it's not what do I feel nurtured? Do I have relationships that will help me? Do I have allies, or do I have do I have friends who can help? It's not, cups. It's very much like, I'm just gonna go fucking do the thing. Like, I'm gonna do it and I'm gonna wreck it and I'm gonna fuck around and find out. Like fire doesn't think about which direction it's going. It just goes on whichever is the closest branch, right? The closest wand to catch fire. And if it can be grown, if it can grow itself, it will. There's not really much deliberation in it. And you can see this too with like fire. It burns even when trapped in a vessel, even when burning is going to ultimately result in its being snuffed out, because there's no thought. It's alive, but it's the impulse to move, to consume, to grow, the desire. So we have a lot of desire and a lot of maybe purposefully not thinking about the consequences, because maybe that's not as much fun. So that's what we have going on this week. It's important to know your limitations, but I suppose it's also important to reach and overreach and figure out what those are. But just be careful, try not to overdo it. This seems like what comes up must go down kind of a thing. However much you're engaging in a new thing or really saying yes to everything, eventually that's going to start to be a burden, right? Because we know where the Ace of Wands leads. Ultimately, if it's unchecked, it leads to the Ten of Wands. And what is the Ten of Wands? It's a burden, right? It's like now we're really struggling to keep that flame alive. We've collected a lot of soot and ash along the way, and we're struggling to reach for new growth that can fuel us. So that's your warning for this week, Aries rising, because it's looking like it's going to be a busy one. So I think it's going to be busy, maybe busy bad, maybe busy good, but make sure to pace yourself. I mean, it is an upright Ace of Wands, so I'm not too worried about it. Like I said, the Four of Swords, that has quite a big breath. That can be like, oh, we're overdoing something to excess. That can be very dangerous, but it can also just be like, oh, maybe we're saying yes a little bit too much to our friends who want to go out and like have a good time, and we really just need to relax. Or maybe we've already done that and we're like very over fatigued, right? But there's still like all this stuff to do. But because we got the upright Ace of Wands, I'm thinking, it's probably not that bad. It's not that severe. I would have expected something heavier if that were the case. So if you wanted me to show my work for that process, that's it. Okay, so now we're going on to Taurus rising. What do we got going on for Taurus rising? Oh, I got some stuff. All right, Taurus rising, we have the Five of Pentacles. Let me zoom in on that. We got some other stuff. I really want to stick to just my 2 cards, 1 per deck. But I can never resist it when they fall out. But we've got the Ace of Pentacles, we've got the 9 of Wands, we've got the 8 of Wands, and we've got the 7 of Wands. So this is really interesting because it definitely shows like a material issue that you're thinking a lot about that is causing a lot of anxiety. And I'll get to why we're talking about thinking, even though it's a Pentacle card in a minute. We feel like we've been struggling for a really long time. We've been going forward. We're getting jaded. We're getting tired, fatigued. We're not quite sure where to go, but things are still moving very quickly. And so regardless, we're going to have to make some quick decisions, and that's going to create some frustration, some ego battles over resources, battles over who gets to have this thing and why. It's really interesting because the the 7 of Wands is actually the Mars ruled decan of Leo, and Leo is all about attention, about shining, about performing the best. Being solar means having all eyes on you all the time, right? Because that's the sun, right? When the sun is in the sky, literally you can't see any other star. Literally that's daytime, right? But what that means is that there's thousands of other stars and there's at least 7 other planets. Not 7, I guess, including the moon as a celestial body. There's like 6 other main celestial bodies you can see in the sky when the sun is gone. But when the sun is there, when it's daytime, you can't see anything else. And so the sun's natural domicile, its home, where it feels most comfortable, is in the sign of Leo. So Leo feels comfortable getting and giving attention. So wherever you have Leo in your chart, this is an area that you maybe want to show off. This is an area that maybe gets a lot of attention, whether you like it or not, depending on what other planets are there and how they're dealing with it. So if you're a Taurus rising, that's going to put Leo in your 4th house. So that's kind of interesting because that could be like, oh, I don't know. It could be like relationship struggles at home. It could be fighting with your parents if you live with your parents. It could be especially the father, because the sun is linked to the father. It could be just fighting with your landlord. It could be struggling to be seen in your own space, or it could be wanting to show off your space but needing to do other things to it, because again, this is about conflict because it's Mars. It could be about defending your home, defending your space. But either way, the backdrop for all of this is that things are going very quickly and we're feeling very tired, very jaded, and we're not quite sure where to put it. But there are new opportunities here. And so let's get back to our main card, because this is going to be really relevant, I think, for you. So the Five of Pentacles is the Mercury ruled decan of the zodiac sign Taurus. Now, for those, I don't know who's watching this, and so I talk about this all the time, but if you're new here, I'll just go ahead and explain it really quick. So the zodiac is made up of 12 signs. Each of those 12 signs have 30 degrees, and each of those 30 degrees can be broken down into 3 10-degree segments. Each of those 3 10-degree segments is sub-ruled by another planet in Chaldean order, and that's the decan, right? And so the meaning of the minor arcana of the tarot, particularly Rider-Waite-Smith or Thoth-based tarot, comes from the mixing of the sign with the sub-ruling planet. And that's essentially what gives you the meanings. When Pamela Pixie Smith illustrated those cards, that was the direction that they were working off of, were the decans, and which have a long history of images and associations and meanings given onto them since ancient Egypt. So, tarot did not come from ancient Egypt, but the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, the secret society to which both Pamela Pixie Smith and Arthur Waite were members, when they went to go make their version of the tarot, they very specifically put in a bunch of these symbols and a bunch of these different things. The astrological correspondences were a part of that. The decans were a part of that astrological correspondence, and that does come from ancient Egypt. The decans were actually originally a stellar calendar. Austin Coppock wrote a book called 36 Faces, which does a beautiful job of explaining the history and the utility of the decans. So if you can find it, I highly recommend it. Anyway, he's also working on the second edition, so it's really hard to find the first edition, but you should have another opportunity to get your hands on one soon. Not sponsored, just a fan. Anyway, though, so the Five of Pentacles is the Mercury ruled decan of the zodiac sign Taurus. Taurus is ruled by Venus, the planet of love, beauty, pleasure, all of the nice things that we like. And Taurus is a fixed earth sign, meaning it's concerned with trying to fix or maintain material pleasure for as long as possible. When we have Mercury's sub-ruled decan of Taurus, we're thinking about that, right? Because Mercury is the planet of intellect, of communication, intelligence. Literally merchant comes from the word Mercury, right? Because this is changing hands. This is the trickster god and his symbols. This is the power of the magician to create things of symbolism that people live or die on, such as currencies, right? So Mercury thinks, Mercury invents, Mercury is very intellectual. And in this earth sign of Taurus, we're trying to figure out the science of perpetuating material pleasure, material wealth. So the reason why the Five of Pentacles is often so desperate looking is because we're looking at areas of scarcity and we're looking at areas of lack, and we're trying to figure out, okay, how do I prevent this from happening? How do I prevent myself from being out in the cold with, nothing to protect me and my loved ones from the harsh elements and from these wolves that have gathered behind us? I don't know if you can see that, but in this card, there are actually little eyes. These are little wolves in the distance. And so basically, when we have Mercury, when we have our intellectual capacity to think into the future or to observe what's going on around us, we see, oh, there's a lot of danger here, actually. There's danger in scarcity. There's danger in a lack of material resource and shelter and food and all of these things. And we need to prevent this outcome from happening. So how do we do that? So that's required, then that necessitates thinking about what happens when things are scarce, how to prevent it, contingency plans, how to get ahead of it, how to make things as good as possible. So oftentimes I find that the Five of Pentacles is more bleak than, it's taken to be more bleak than it actually is. What it really is we're very worried about scarcity. We're really concerned with making our material abundance last as long as possible, which is why we're vigilant, why she's like looking around. She's not just running, she's looking for the best course forward for her and her family. So this is the idea of the Five of Pentacles, right? Is we want to look for the best possible next step to ensure our maintained material pleasure. And if not pleasure, then at least survival. So this is what the Five of Pentacles ultimately is pretty much always pointing towards. You feel like a lot of scarcity. Scarcity mindset's a big problem. Having that burden of people relying on you for their sustenance and for their shelter can be a big issue. Let's not forget that the moon's exaltation is in Taurus. So, the moon likes being protected. the moon represents our vulnerabilities and how we go about protecting and caring for those vulnerabilities, our needs, our material needs, such as, food, water, shelter, and love, which I think is a material need when you get right down to it. Like, you physically need to be touched and loved and be part of a community, because that's how humanity evolved. We're just social creatures. So the moon needs a certain amount of protection and a certain amount of surety, and Taurus provides that. So I think it's also important to note, like, Mercury is, how do we get to the most material pleasure, but the why is Venus and the moon. The why is because protecting the vulnerable, protecting my children, protecting myself and my body, getting that physical nourishment to keep thriving. And this is, that's really what puts the pressure on people, right? Is when they or their loved ones are in serious material peril. That's what, as they say, necessity is the mother of invention. When you need to figure out how to go forward, that's when you're most likely to figure out how to go forward, right? It's hard to think about things going wrong when we're in moments of pleasure. And yet when we get the Five of Pentacles, sometimes that's what we do. So we have a new opportunity presented to us, or that will be presented to us. This could be a new job, a potential kind of side gig. Perhaps somebody gives you some seed money. Perhaps you use your tax returns in a very clever way. I don't know. But it's upright, so that's good. That's very auspicious, but it still is creating, or at least is not helping, all of this other anxiety and struggle. And it's probably because we're like, okay, what is actually going to work, right? What's the practical material way we can get these things up and running? So even though we do have a little bit of money coming in, or some kind of opportunity to make money, or to make material security at least, which I suppose could mean a lot of different things in a lot of different contexts. So it doesn't have to be just actual money. It could be maybe somebody's lending you a garage to get your business started, right? Maybe somebody is lending you a car so that you can apply for a job interview. The Ace of Pentacles is powerful, but it's also small. It's beginning, right? So it is that spark, that initial something. And in the material, that can be as simple as, well, your car broke down, but you have an interview to get to, so your friend is going to lend you a car, right? This is an Ace of Pentacles, because, like, wow, what a lucky opportunity. It could also just be being in the right place at the right time. It could be finding a little something to get you started. So, it could be a lot of different things. It's something that's small, that, like a seed, could be nurtured and could grow into future abundance for a long time if it's treated well, if you really think about how to, use it wisely. Which, the Five of Pentacles with the Ace of Pentacles does kind of show that trajectory, right? We have an opportunity and we're taking it seriously, and we're allowing ourselves to really think about how to extend that wealth. But things are moving quickly, and so we do feel compelled to act, but we're a little bit hesitant, perhaps. The the Eight of Wands is things are moving very fast. And so it's going to be difficult to, you really want to hit that landing as quickly as possible and make sure that you're in the right place at the right time, and still be vigilant and be a little bit, cautious, because when things go quickly, they can go wrong quickly, right? It can be difficult to correct a trajectory that's going that fast, and resources are an issue, right? We're fighting over resources or having some kind of ego battle or something like that. So that's for Taurus rising. That's your week. Sorry, guys. But I will say this Ace of Pentacles is definitely one of the more optimistic cards. So I think that whatever this is, it's all either being caused by or will help be resolved by this new material opportunity. You know what they say, it's like something new comes with new problems, right? New territory, literally territory. So we're going to have to figure out how we can juggle all of these different material desires, necessities, resources, with what's actually practically going to work. So there's going to be a lot of thinking about the material, and potentially doing some ego battles over it as well. That could be an option. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and go on to Gemini rising. So Gemini rising, this is for you. And again, I use the rising sign because that way I can look at the astrology of the month if it becomes relevant, and get a more precise read on things. I find it to be a lot more accurate personally, so that's why we're going off of the rising. There are lots of different ways to find out your rising sign. If you don't know, you need your birthday, time, and place, and you can go to, I don't know, there's like a billion different websites that'll do it if you Google a birth chart calculator, but I use whole sign astrology for whatever that's worth to you. And that's how we're going to go from there. Okay, here we go. Okay, so with Gemini rising, we get the reverse Nine of Pentacles, and I'm going to draw a card from the Nameless. Kind of zoom in on that a bit. So we're doing Gemini rising. Okay. Oh, that's funny. This is funny because this is the Eight of Wands again, but in a different deck and for a different sign. So maybe things are going to start moving very quickly for a lot of people, at least for Taurus rising and for Gemini rising, because we got the Eight of Wands in different decks for those two signs. Anyway, if you're a Gemini rising, then that means Jupiter is in your first house. So before, when we were talking about Aries risings, where Venus was, I said when benefics go into your rising sign, that means they're bringing their gifts directly to you. When Venus went over my rising sign, you know, I got like free coffees from my local baristas that I really liked. My partner went out of his way to do a lot of favors for me. Like, you know, he redid the whole garden and a bunch of other things because it doesn't matter. But the point is, things that were pleasurable and were nice and friendly, social, those things happened easier. It was nicer. And a lot of there were kind of like these little gifts here and there. Venus is a lesser benefic, and I do find that Venus's blessings can sometimes be a little bit more material than Jupiter's, because Venus can represent like the physical good thing. So for example, whereas Mercury would be like the money you pay for the fruit, Venus is the fruit itself, right? Venus is the value, the thing of value versus the mercurial symbolic value we place on it with currency. So anyway, when we're looking at Jupiter, though, Jupiter tends to bigify, uplift, and expand. He grants blessings, miracles, abundance, growth. And that growth is often very spiritual in nature. Not always, but it definitely has that ability and has that kind of proclivity. It can be a material expansion if it's in an earth sign. Or an intellectual expansion if it's in an air sign, which in Gemini, it is an air sign. Gemini is a sign ruled by Mercury. It's actually Jupiter's exile. He doesn't typically do well in Mercury signs. And the reason is because Mercury is about dissecting, right? Making things smaller and looking at each detail if it's Virgo, or collecting every small data point if it's Gemini. And so with Gemini influencing Jupiter, we see a lot, like a billion things, right? It's like multiplying all of the little things that Gemini brings, which is already so many. And so we see like an abundance of options, an abundance of thoughts, of ideas, of social activities, of friends, of all the Gemini things, right? Gemini love to experiment. They love to play devil's advocate. They're big on intellectual, intellectual data collection, right? They want to see all of the different options, all of the different possibilities, all of the different perspectives, and typically are not, if you have a lot of Gemini placements or very prominent Gemini placements, then you'll probably know what I'm talking about, but oftentimes linked to inconsistency and a lack of judgment. And it's more like all of these things are equally interesting, right? So it's easy for them to kind of flip from one to the other really quickly. And a lot of other people with a lot of other placements, like say if your placements are very heavy in Taurus or other fixed signs, maybe don't like that so much because it appears inconsistent, fickle, two-faced or backstabby is one of the kind of like meme trigger words that they associate with Gemini. And it's really because, well, they never declared allegiance in the first place, right? Because they're just thinking about it. They're playing with that idea. Mental play is a big part of what Gemini brings to the table. So when Jupiter's there, it really expands that a lot. There's like a billion little thoughts to consider, a billion different avenues. There's so many little things that it can become difficult to kind of choose a direction definitively any one way. So that's why Jupiter tends to struggle, right? Because he wants to unify, unite, make things bigger, uplift the whole. And Gemini is really about looking at every individual little piece and kind of experimenting with it, playing with it, or even just like, kind of giving and receiving, right? And taking all of these different considerations. So at any rate, we have the Nine of Pentacles reversed, which is actually the Venus-ruled decan of Virgo, which is a sign of Mercury. Mercury is, okay, so Venus is in fall in Virgo, meaning she gets stuck She gets stuck and obsessive over the idea of perfection, which if you're trying to enjoy Venusian things like pleasure and beauty and all of those other nice things, getting stuck on perfection can be very detrimental. But in the Venus decan of Virgo, she has a very special power here. And that power oftentimes, as Austin Coppock puts it, comes down to quality control. My experience as having a Venus in Venus's decan of Virgo is quality control is a big issue. It's that kind of the taste to say like this doesn't work and I'm going to make it better, right? Like I'm going to figure out how I can improve this thing, how I can optimize or maximize the beauty, the refined pleasure of this particular thing. Because again, Virgo being Mercury, it's about system optimization, refinement. Anyway, we don't need to get too far into it, but the point is, things are moving quickly and we might not have the option of making everything perfect, right? Because as I was saying before with Taurus getting the 8 of Wands, when things move very rapidly, details kind of get left behind. It becomes difficult to kind of veer directions. So, hello, somebody's from Australia. Nice to have you. I'm just doing a reading right now for everybody in the zodiac based on your rising sign. So right now we're on Gemini rising, and hopefully that is interesting or educational for you. We've already done Aries, Taurus, and now we're in Gemini. So we're not doing like personal specific readings. We're doing readings for everybody. Anyway, so what's interesting about this too is we kind of have recently the South Node go into Virgo, which I don't know, like during the eclipses, I think that's going to be really relevant for people who have a lot of things in Virgo. And the only reason I'm mentioning Virgo is because this is a decan, right? The 9 of Pentacles is a Venus ruled decan of Virgo. So to me, that symbolizes, oh, Gemini risings have something going on in this area of life. So I wanted to check that and see what's going on. And I don't know, it's interesting because Jupiter just recently, I don't know, it's relative, but recently went direct in the sign of Gemini. So whatever issue, like it might have been that Gemini risings received a lot of abundance, a lot of kind of miracles, blessings, uplifting things, spiritual direction, guidance, also teachers. Jupiter's associated with teachers a lot, or sages, spiritual leaders, that kind of thing. But it was kind of inconsistent, or there was a lot of fluctuation, or sometimes a blessing was sort of a curse in disguise, or a curse was sort of a blessing in disguise, because Jupiter was retrograding. So it was maybe internally experienced, an internal sensation of like spiritual development, but was triggered externally by things not really going the way that they were expected to go, or by there being delays or hangups or some kind of issue in regards to the things Jupiter represents. So faith, belief, mercy, help, abundance, mirth, that kind of thing. Some kind of upset with that, then causing us to really look within and find our inner pillars of spiritual strength and stuff. But anyway, Jupiter's direct now, so that should be going a lot smoother, and soon is going to be going into Cancer, which if you're a Gemini rising is your second house. So we can experience that as being a potentially uplifting in the material plane insofar as the second house is like your resources and stuff. But that isn't going to happen until, let me look it up, because I don't ever remember the dates of things. Here we go. So one second. I'm just going to look it up for you. Okay, so that's going to be in June. So in June, Jupiter will be in Cancer direct in your second house. And actually on June 10th, Mercury is going to be there too. Just happened to pull up to June 10th because that was where I was going in 7-day increments. And so Mercury happens to be there too. But anyway, Jupiter and Mercury together in the second house definitely seems to me to be an expanding of like finances or some kind of like material, like getting more money, right? Getting more mercantile, more wealth, more, if you are already in the business of selling and trading or bartering goods, then that was probably more of that, and pleasurable, miraculous deals, things like that. But it could, I think, also just be like bigger money, right? Bigger resources, more to draw from. So that's something to look forward to in June. Anyway, going back to today. Right. So it might be difficult to progress forward if we're hung up on having everything be perfect or trying to get things to be to have things be really secure and they're not quite ready, but the situation is really leading us forward and leading us forward very quickly. So we're going to have to kind of make a plan and just use what works and then kind of forget the rest, right? Because this to me really feels like there's something in the material that's not quite working out. You want to be more independent than you are. You want to feel more in control than you are. You want things to be more perfect than they are. But the situation is kind of passing you by, right? So we need to kind of take what we can and forget the rest and then move on and make sure that that trajectory is going somewhere we like. So the other thing too that I want to bring up is that the Eight of Wands can often be a boost in progress. The Eight of Wands is associated with the Mercury ruled decan of the sign Sagittarius, which is ruled by Jupiter. Since Jupiter is in your rising right now, I find that's pretty relevant. So what we're thinking, this is the idea of like, one way that the Eight of Wands can manifest is in messages or in parcels being delivered to you. And those messages can be either divine or mundane. So you can literally get a phone call that perpetuates things really quickly, or a letter or an email, whatever, some kind of physical or mundane message that makes things go really, really quickly after that. Or it can be more of a divine message, more of an insight, a spark of inspiration, being like, oh, I finally understand how to do this. This is going to make everything go 10 times smoother. Now I'm like, can't be stopped. I'm on the way, right? It's sort of like if you're trying to fix something, you know, you're trying to fix a computer. You don't know what's wrong. You don't know what's wrong. So it's taking forever. It's very frustrating. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I know. This is the part that's wrong. I know how to fix it. Then you order the part, you fix it, and everything's going super smoothly and you can do whatever you want. So to me, on the one hand, this is like, okay, we can't be too fussy with the perfectionism here, because the reverse Nine of Pentacles in particular is oftentimes the hang up is perfectionism. We want to be independent and financially secure and able to be a perfectly contained kind of optimized system in and of ourselves. We want to be able to really stand on our own, but it's not working as quickly as we want. It's not going as smoothly. So we're kind of like fussing over the details. So on the one hand, there is definitely like we need to get the best result we can, given that things are going to be moving quickly pretty soon. On the other hand, you know, you might get the insight or the spark of wisdom you need this week to really move past that, to really fix things and get things going in the right direction. So be on the lookout, check your emails, check your phone calls, because that might be exactly the piece of information that you need. Jupiter's in your rising sign, so blessings of understanding could be yours this week. And I think that's going to help get us over this kind of like stagnant, kind of muddy energy, which I'm pretty sure is because it's not working as perfectly as we want. But we might need to just let go of that and get it as good as we can get it, so that we can move on to the next thing. Okay, so that was for Gemini rising. So now I'm going to go ahead and do Cancer rising. I think we're making pretty good time here. Last time I did this, my live was 4 hours long, so trying not to repeat that. Okay, so Cancer rising, we have the Six of Cups, and I'll just take a little look on this. We got more of Litha, so I think I'll just not pull one for the nameless one, even though like I really want to, but I think I won't. So we have the Six of Cups for Cancer, and we also have the reverse Two of Pentacles. We have a Knight of Cups. We have a reverse Hierophant. We have the reverse Hermit, and we have the reverse Six of Wands. So I'm going to focus on this because this is the card that we properly drew. The Six of Cups is oftentimes the keywords you see. Okay, oftentimes the keywords you see with tarot in regards to the Six of Cups are things like nostalgia, memories, dealing with children, childhood traumas, childhood memories, childhood relationships, and working with children in the present, being a mentor, things like that. Well, it's really interesting because this is actually the Sun ruled decan of the zodiac sign Scorpio, which is ruled by Mars. And Scorpio is instinctual, and it's very, oh my gosh, excuse me. I got something in my throat. As being ruled by Mars, it is inherently kind of aggressive, but it is the version of Mars that is defensive, that is behind the shell, that has its nice protective barrier, and then very quickly lances in and puts that poison that then corrupts and destroys from the inside out. But you know, a scorpion is an animal doing its business like anything. Those are like protective measures. And so it's really interesting because when we get the Six of Cups, which is generally a pretty positive card, or at least it's portrayed that way often from other readers, it's really a very solidly neutral card in my opinion. This is kind of like this, how do instincts evolve, right? How does that instinctual scorpion jab come into play? Well, instincts are ingrained responses, usually fight or flight responses, based on stimulation, based on things that we've experienced in our formative years. So there's that link to childhood, right? It's very much like the thing that we realize would protect us in our youth, we oftentimes will play out again and again and again in our adulthood, whether that was good or not. Sometimes those coping mechanisms are maladaptive, sometimes they're very useful. But essentially, what we're looking at with this card is like, Scorpio's black and white relationship capacity, right? Scorpio has friend or it has foe. And if it has foe, it is immediately defensive and on the attack. And if it's friend, it's fiercely loyal and it's fiercely protective. That's the energy we get with Scorpio. It's very suspicious. It's very much collecting vulnerabilities and emotional weak points in that armor, so that if the need arises, that scorpion stinger can go in between the cracks of the armor and really deliver a lethal blow that just ends the problem, right? That just results in the protection of the scorpion. So that's the ideal situation for Scorpio, is having the ability to quickly defend yourself if needed. And because it's a water sign, usually that takes a very emotional lens. So with the Six of Cups, we're really seeing like things that have happened to us in our childhood inform our instinctual reactions to things that happen to us present day. And that could be very beneficial if you were well protected in your youth. If you had a relatively good childhood, you might know how to manage these feelings, these expectations in a way that's productive. One of the nice things is kind of like you get what you give, right? In the original Rider-Waite-Smith tarot depiction of this card, it's like two kids exchanging cups full of flowers. And it's this very kind of idyllic thing, but in the background, there's this guard soldier with a weapon. And so it's this idea of like, on the one hand, it starts off innocent enough if what's being poured into your cup is something worth passing on to somebody else, right? If you got good and love and benefit, you give good and love and benefit. But if you got poison, you're passing on poison, right? You're passing on toxic coping mechanisms, right? Obsession, suspicion, aggression, seeing enemies everywhere when they aren't enemies. And what this happens is it goes back and back and back into generational cycles of either abuse or protection and nourishment, right? Depending on what you got. So the Six of Cups is kind of a complicated card because all of Scorpio's stuff is complicated by nature. But it's really about understanding our instinctual vulnerabilities and our instinctual coping mechanisms, where they come from, and if we want to pass them forward or not, if we want to keep that goblet going forward. And to do that, we need to really know what's in it, right? And so it's interesting because with these other cards, we have the Two of Pentacles reversed. We have the Knight of Cups. The Knight of Cups, I often find, is somebody who solves emotional problems, right? The knights, what do knights do in their role, in their social role? Well, they go off and they quest, right? They complete quests at the behest of the king or queen. They solve problems. And so the Knight of Cups is an emotional problem solver, because they're the knight and the cups are water's emotion. So that's what it is. Sometimes when we see the Knight of Cups, this can be like a knight in shining armor coming in to save the day and making sure everybody feels okay and feels protected and feels loved and everything is like the way that it should be. They're coming in to solve that issue. This could be a mediator. This could be a therapist. This could be somebody who's actively going out, like a family member who's like, okay, we need to solve this emotional problem. These two other family members aren't getting along. We need to come together and solve this issue. But sometimes in a less helpful manifestation, the Knight of Cups, can be kind of like a too good to be true, right? It's kind of like the devil in a Sunday hat, or this idea of like, you want to come in and solve the problem, but you're willing to lie, you're willing to manipulate, you're willing to kind of use less than ideal means to get there, because really you just want whatever the goal is, whether that's to win somebody's heart, to end a conflict, to start a conflict. The Knight of Cups can be very much like over promising, under delivering. The good news is this Knight of Pentacles, or sorry, I keep saying Pentacles, this Knight of Cups is upright. So at the very least, we can say, well, their intentions are good. At the very least, this is somebody coming in to help you solve an emotional problem. Somebody who's going to be on your side, who's going to literally champion for you, right? Because we have this, triumphant knight, the dragon head, somebody who wants to protect you from these vulnerabilities, to nurture you, to help you, and they're going to, be the questing one, right? They're going to be, I'm going to solve this problem for you. I have a friend who's a Scorpio, and boy is he, and he gets a lot of joy in like helping me solve these very specific problems. One of them is, I have a lot of forgeries online. People just steal my stuff all the time because that's what people do to artists, I guess, in the modern day. I mean, they do it a lot anyway. The point is though, he goes out and he like finds them, right? And he finds them, and he reports them, and he's like, you are like, thieving, and this is awful, and blah blah blah. And that's really nice to have somebody like that on your side who sees that this is a problem that's affecting you really deeply and wants to help you with it. So when we see the Knight of oh my gosh, the Knight of Cups, I keep saying Pentacles, the Knight of Cups upright, this is somebody who's coming in, who's seeing that you are in distress and wants to help you solve that problem, whatever that looks like. Sometimes in a relationship reading, that can be like, oh, this is a love interest who's going to go and declare a message, right? They're going to be like, hey, knights are often known, unlike pages, which are kind of learning, assessing, they can deliver messages, but knights are very much like, by the way, this is the situation, or like, here is a declaration or a display of my love for you, if the Knight of Cups is the contender, because Cups is oftentimes will bring up some kind of a relationship, not necessarily romantic. It could also be somebody actively extending the olive branch to you if you've had like a fight with a friend or family or something like that. But either way, this is a good card to have upright because it means that there's somebody out there who's trying to help you solve an emotional issue that you're having. This emotional issue is probably rooted in childhood. I don't want to say exactly childhood trauma because it could be good, right? Because again, it's very neutral, but there's some ingrained childhood instinct that is kind of maybe a factor here. And the Knight of Cups is somebody who's going to really help you to either get through that or work with it, or maybe it's informing like the reason why you like this person, or the reason why this person is helping you is because there was some kind of childhood connection or early connection or something like that. And then let's see, we also got the Two of Pentacles reversed. So this is about excuse me. The Two of Pentacles is the Jupiter ruled decan of Capricorn. This is finding the best physical location that is going to allow your endeavors and your fruits to really flourish. This is also about figuring out how to make balance, right? How to balance your inner child and your current adult self, right? How to satisfy both parties. Because this is reversed, we might say, okay, well, there's some imbalance here. Either we can't thrive in this literal environment, or the environment that we came from gave us maladaptive coping mechanisms, which means we're not making enough time for, say, work or play, right? We're not dividing the areas of our life in a way that is practically helpful and conducive to a healthy psyche and to positive results. So something about the way that we're dividing our material assets and resources is out of balance. Now that could literally just be physically, like, this is not a good climate for what you're trying to do. You might need to move, right? Or you might need to find a different venue, different location. But it could also just be, well, it's not the place, it's just the things in the place are not being utilized well, right? They're not being divided correctly. One of your material resources is your time, right? You're not using your time correctly. You need to rest more, or you need to work more. There's some kind of drift between that. We also have the reverse Hierophant, which means like, oh, this to me is giving kind of childhood religious trauma, or some kind of leader, teacher, guru who like misled you in some way, whether intentionally or not. Maybe some things that we've learned from our faith, from our beliefs, from our institutions are kind of not helping us anymore, or kind of creating more imbalance than they're creating balance. And so we're trying to get back to this core, to this root sense of self, sense of morality, ethics, justice, whatever it is. And we're trying to get a truer understanding of what that means and why. And it's probably a little painful, so we're not really wanting to do it alone. The Hermit reverse is very much like either needing to get out there, needing to meet friends, or not wanting to look within. Sometimes because it can just be out of balance, it also can be like retreating, not for the sake of true introspection or soul searching or problem solving, but because you're afraid and you don't want to get out there. You don't want to put your faith to the test. You don't want to test your theories of if you found it or not, if you feel nurtured or not. You don't want to push it too much. It can also be intellectual elitism. Like, I don't need to do all of this because I already know this Hierophant has told me that I'm fine. So I don't need to look within. I don't need to identify sources of childhood trauma. I don't need to reevaluate and restructure my life. This is associated with Virgo, the Hermit. And one thing that happens a lot with heavy Virgo energy, it's because it's immutable, and because it's immutable ruled by Mercury, but it's an earth sign. We have this kind of thing that happens where it's a duality between the most clean, pristine, sterile, and like the dirtiest, messiest shit you've ever seen. And so because it's Mercury, a lot of times what I've seen personally is that manifests as this cognitive dissonance where we really exalt all of these perfected qualities of ourselves, our perfected belief systems and ideals, and then we really are in denial about everything else. We really don't acknowledge any of the other stuff. It becomes very difficult because usually it's one of those things where you hide your flaw by putting it on your face, like everyone else can see it, but you are like refuse to look at it. You know what I mean? So that could be a problem. So the Knight of Pentacles, oh my God, again with Pentacles, the Knight of Cups can be about trying to help you work through that without being abrasive or rude or manipulative, because again, this is an upright knight, so they're trying to do the right thing, they're trying to be helpful. As far as if that's received well, I definitely sense there's a reluctance to look at things for what they are. There's also, this is another thing, the Six of Cups can be about like romanticizing, idealizing, and also heavy on the notes of nostalgia, right? Thinking everything worked in the past, so everything's going fine now, but needing to really reevaluate in context of what's going on. Like, is it fine? The things that we've learned, that we've inherited, these belief structures, they maybe had worked for us as children when we weren't really thinking critically about them, or when other people were facilitating those abilities for us. But now something is out of balance, it's out of whack, and it probably has to do with the lessons and beliefs that we were taught from an institutional place early on. And I think there's some shame in there, and there's some shame in looking at that and really seeing it for what it is, because we really want this like idyllic, perfect picture to be true. We're really clinging to that idea. Since we are talking about Cancer risings, it is very likely that we are we are already kind of a victim to nostalgia in a way. We cling to our emotions, and Cancer is the crab. Crabs walk sideways, always kind of looking at the past to get to the future, circling around what you need, growing sideways, so to speak, is a good phrase for that, I think. It's not that you're not moving. Cancers are cardinal. They go forward. They push through that wave of emotion, but they are very much they're crabs, right? They cling to their emotional safety. They hide in that shell, that protective shell. They want security, they want stability, they want love, they want this emotional kind of protection. And so there is a tendency, I think, to over romanticize or over idealize the past and not really give enough credit to the future or even the present, like what you can actively do to kind of shape the reality you want. I definitely see like people with Cancer risings, they tend to think of themselves as having a really idealistic, nice childhood sometimes. And then, but if you know them and you're like, oh, well, what about this time you told me, you had all these issues with your father, or like you had all these problems with like inconsistent housing, or you had all these problems. Like, what about those? And they're like, oh yeah, I guess that did suck. Yeah. There's either an unwillingness to admit it or to be seen in that vulnerability, or maybe just to kind of acknowledge it. Sometimes we just want to feel safe and protected, and the past feels like the best, safest place to be, but we can't live in the past, right? A lot of the times too, that does come with this protection from shame, protection from being seen and being judged in a negative way. And I think that's really corroborated by this Hermit reversed, which is, associated with Virgo. This idea of wanting to put only the best, most perfect image of what is, and then kind of brush the rest under the rug or deal with it in a personal way on your own. And so I think it's really honestly very hopeful and very helpful with this upright Knight of Cups, because it's like, well, you're not alone, right? You have somebody that you can work with this out with, and somebody you can talk about this with. Maybe a sibling, maybe a counselor, a therapist, maybe a friend, maybe a love interest, but somebody who's willing to like help you fight those emotional inner demons and like really rise above them. And I think that it is going to be rooted in what you've believed, right? There's going to be some kind of cognitive dissonance between what you believe, what you've seen, what you've thought about, and what you've been taught to believe, what you've been taught to feel. And those are really difficult positions to be in, right? Because if we admit that we believe something falsely and that we've been allowing our inner morality to kind of be guided by that this whole time, then there is a sense of shame and humiliation, which we do see with the reversed Six of Wands, right? It's like being recognized in the bad way. Like we don't want to admit, oh, I was wrong, or I was misled, or I believed this thing and I shouldn't have, or I allowed my maladaptive coping mechanisms from past childhood traumas to make decisions in the current and project those issues onto people who had no business bearing the weight of that projection, right? That's something that's very human. It's very relatable. And it does also kind of stem from this mismanagement of resources. And it can be about this kind of the mismanagement of resources can be perpetuated or worsened by the living in the past and not acknowledging what needs to happen to progress into the future we want. So it's looking like we're going to work through some of that, Cancer risings. That'll be fun for you. Good luck. It's nice that you have a knight to help you. Because knights are very active. They get things done. I will mention at the bottom of the deck is a reversed king. So that kind of corroborates this bad, I shouldn't say bad because it's probably not that simple. Emotionally destructive or manipulative or otherwise unpleasant authority figures, right? People in positions of power over you, particularly emotional power. I would say priests, religious leaders. You know what's funny is that actually old associations with like tarot and types of people, the cups or the hearts are often associated with clergy members, so like priests. And then having the Hierophant reverse definitely speaks to me with the Six of Cups is childhood religious trauma. That's kind of the vibe that I get from that. But it could also just be, you know, a father figure who was very emotional or emotionally present and can potentially be manipulative in this case. Somebody who doesn't show you what they're really thinking or feeling because they want that power, they want that authority. And so be careful about that. Definitely step one is acknowledging who in your life is the knight and who in your life is the king. Because it seems like the king at best is misinformed or misleading and at worst is actively manipulating or corrosive. So we need to be able to identify who's helping and who's hurting. One of the nice things about tarot is it handily breaks this down for you in terms of their social role. Somebody who's above you, who's telling you what to do, how to do it, why to do it, particularly to feel it, because we're talking about cups. So really it's like what to feel and how to feel and what that means spiritually and emotionally. That's the person who's probably not helping you that much. Somebody, however, who's on your side, who's a knight, who's going to be like, hey, what do you want? How do you feel? How can we get you to feel the best? What can I do for you to make you feel like you're protected and nurtured and all of those things, right? So those are the differences between those two archetypes expressing. And noted, the king is now, it's reversed, right? So it's expressing negatively. It would be a different story if it was upright. But because we have the knight upright and the king reversed, this is one of those classic tales where, you know, you're told to do something by somebody. And, you know, and I mean, you can just totally see it as like, if we're going to lay it as a fairy tale, right? Like the king sends the knight off to do a thing, but the king is evil. The knight assesses the situation and he's like, I'm not going to murder this child. How can I protect this child, right? The knight kind of goes rogue and does something for the better of the person, which in this case is going to be our Cancer rising friend here. So that's the kind of situation that appears in my mind is like, well, maybe you both have some kind of connection to an authority figure, a priest, a father, a therapist, I don't know, a mutual friend who has, for whatever reason, authority in a situation, a boss even, you know, some kind of executive or something. And so you both know this person or you both have access to this person, or at least the knight knows of this person. I say that they know each other because they're both cup cards. It might be different if it was like a king of, like if you had a king of wands reversed and a knight of cups upright, I might say, oh, the knight's going to help you, but they maybe don't know who that other person is. But I think that they'll probably know each other, or at least know of each other. Anyway, so I like to say that the difference between control and support is that control is help on somebody else's terms and support is help on your terms. So if somebody is willing to give you the help that you need as you need it, that's support, right? That's like, look, this is what I need from you. As opposed to, okay, I need this. And then somebody says, well, I'll give you this if you do that, or if you do this other thing, or you're going to have to, you know, there's some kind of return on investment going on. It has to be on their terms instead of your terms. So we're looking for the person who's going to help us on our terms, right? And that will be helpful going forward. So now we're moving on to Leo rising. So Leo rising, what do we have going on? Oh, and it's really interesting too, because like, Cancer is, if you have a Cancer rising, I don't know where your rising sign is, like what degree it is, but if you subscribe to Pluto as being a thing that affects people, Pluto did just move into Aquarius, which I think will be, well, it's going to be a time for everybody. I mean, it's so like generational if it impacts at all, but here, let me look at the astrology really quick. So if you have a Cancer rising, that puts that in your 8th house, which I would be interested to see how that unfolds, because
8th house is like inheritance, death, and taxes and stuff. I don't know. For whatever reason, that seems really intriguing. But the point is, though, and in your 9th house, you have a ton of stuff going on right now. If you're a Cancer rising, you have the Sun, Mercury, Saturn, and the North Node and Neptune all in Pisces in your 9th house at this moment in time. So that's a lot, and it's about belief. The 9th house is about belief, about religion, about faith and ideology, learned beliefs. It's totally what we're seeing, this reverse Hierophant stuff. There might be a crisis of faith or some kind of issue going on with that, being very hungry for a miracle, very much wanting to see that. I mean, we literally got the reversed Hermit with the reversed Hierophant, and when we look at Cancer rising's 9th house, which is where we'd find that Hierophant kind of subject matter, we see Mercury there. Mercury as, you know, being the ruler of Virgo, which is where, you know, which represents the Hermit that we just saw, and where the South Node is. So it's very, I don't know, that seems very interesting to me. But yeah, sorting through what to believe and the restriction on like hopeful belief and spiritual belief is probably going to be a thing. We've got like Mercury about to be, and Mercury's approaching a conjunction with Saturn, so the limitations and restrictions with our thoughts and beliefs. We also got the Sun just barely entering into Pisces, so there's going to be a lot of illumination in our beliefs right now. So yeah, Cancer rising's got like a time and a half in that subject matter. So oh, and also Mars is currently in your 1st house. You remember, I don't know if you were there, or I don't know who I'm talking to right now or who's listening, but before I was talking about when, you know, benefics go into your risings and they bring things to you, and Mars brings things to you, but Mars brings things like conflict, fights, aggression, also passion and drive, because Mars is also very motivating, is definitely the get to it kind of force. But usually I see that manifested as like some kind of conflict, right? There's some kind of friction or tension. Mars is really good at bringing fights to you. He's in Cancer right now, which is his fall, which means he's getting really upset about every fucking thing. And he's also retrograde, which means he's very powerful and very inconsistent. When Mars is retrograde, that means he's opposing the Sun, and he's very bright and very loud, but he's not being controlled by anything. Austin Coppock in one of his courses likens it to the werewolf, because it's of a time not of your choosing that you're overcome with these martial urges to fight, to defend, to rip apart, you know, to sever. These are the kinds of things that Mars brings to the table. So having that in your rising is like, maybe you're much more irritable lately than you would otherwise be, or people are bringing a lot of problems and conflicts to you, picking fights with you potentially, picking fights about faith, I could see, just because of all that stuff you've got going on in there. Although, and also because right now Mars is trining, I mean, at this moment, Mars is trining Mercury in your 9th house, but like Mercury moves fast, so that's not necessarily going to be the case whenever anybody watches this video in the future. But by sign, at least, so I don't know what the degrees of your planets are, but by sign, you've got a Mars in your 1st house trining the Sun and Mercury and Saturn and the MC, if your MC is in the 9th, or it could be, it is right now in this chart that I'm looking at for this hour. Well, what the chart I'm looking at is for February 19th at 1:37. So it's a bit in the future, but I wanted to put Cancer on the rising so that I could see more clearly what was going on. So if you happen to look at this video at that time, then that's what's going on. But anyway, so you've got the North Node and Neptune and Saturn and Mercury and the Sun all in the 9th house, about belief, about faith, about religion, also long distance travel. You might be traveling. All of these different foreign things, foreign beliefs, foreign concepts, beliefs and structures and ideology, all of that stuff is trining Mars in the 1st house, which might make you very motivated to pick fights about it, to explore it, to go off and do a thing in regards to that. You might travel, maybe for not super pleasant circumstances, but that might help you kind of work through all of that stuff. And I say not pleasant circumstances because a trine is a positive aspect and it makes things go really quickly and usually really smoothly, but it's Mars as a, you know, as a malefic trining that Mercury in the 9th house. So if you do travel, it probably will be quick and revealing in some way, but it might not necessarily be pleasant, right? That's kind of a different thing than being useful. Anyway, so now we're looking at Leo risings. I'm going to move the chart too so that I can see that more, so I can see that faster. If you're a Leo rising, Mars is in your 12th house because that puts Cancer as your 12th house. And something that's fun about that is when I was observing Mars in the 12th house with my family, I noticed that So famously, the 12th house is associated with hidden enemies. It's like the subconscious, the hidden, the things that are unseen, intangible. Also, isolation, being alone. The 12th house is a pretty hard house to be in. And when Mars is there, when I noticed Mars was in the 12th house of my family members, something that happened is, so one of them said something that really upset me and my sister. And we didn't really want to make a big deal out of it. We weren't really sure what to do about it. It was kind of like, I don't really want to make a big deal out of it. I don't think that they necessarily meant it to be that mean, but it hurt my feelings really badly and I was upset about it. So my sister and I ended up talking about it. And so we were essentially gossiping, shit talking, whatever. And it's not like we were plotting doom. It's not like hidden enemies in like a high sense of the word, although depending on your life circumstance, potentially that could have been it. But for us, how that manifested was like, well, so that person we were mad at, Mars was in their 12th house. And yeah, we had hidden resentments, hidden aggressions, hidden problems and conflicts with this person. But the reason that they were hidden was not because we were like plotting doom or it was just because we didn't find it worth bringing to their attention, but they were still kind of there. So it was like that lingering resentment. And I think Mars going into the 12th house is kind of comes with that. Is this sort of like there's stuff, resentments, frictions, problems, motivations, conflicts in this place where you can't quite see them or address them, and you kind of feel that they're there, but because it's not brought to the table, you can't really act on it in any kind of way. So I find it kind of interesting to note that that might be a thing that you're dealing with, and eventually, when when Mars goes out of that 12th house and it unfortunately or fortunately goes into Leo, which is your rising, those hidden issues or resentments that are festering in the 12th house are going to be brought to you, brought to your attention. So I don't know. I would say one of the things that I learned about observing that transit was maybe just maybe wait it out, because eventually if it's a big deal, it'll be brought to you, literally the next cycle, it'll be brought to your attention, right? The next time Mars moves into a sign, it's going to be, if it's in your 12th house, that means it's going to be brought to your attention pretty obviously. So that's kind of interesting. Anyway, I think I kind of already did shuffle for Leo, but we'll shuffle again. So Leo rising. So we have Justice. I'm going to draw a card from the nameless one because I was trying to draw cards from 2 different decks as cooperation, which is always fun to do. Okay. Here we go. Leo rising. And actually, something I've been thinking about doing, on my Patreon, my horoscopes are written, but I'm thinking about making like a special video for my Patreon subscribers for their horoscopes, and then just having the transcripts attached and be written, because writing them out takes a really long time, and I think I could get a lot more detail if I was just like doing the video. So I don't know. I think that I might do a longer, in-depth horoscope reading for everybody for what's it, January, February, March, for March. I'm going to try the video format because that way I think I might be able to say a lot more, a lot faster. And it might be a little bit more special. And then if they wanted the transcripts, they could still have it. So that's kind of fun. Anyway, back to Leo. Okay. I decided to pull an extra card because this gesture is interesting. So this is the extra card. We'll put it aside for now. So if you are a Leo rising, we're dealing with themes of justice, of things being fair, promoting harmony, promoting social harmony, social nuance, right? Where like everybody gets as much as they need or is warranted. These are the kinds of things justice is concerned about. And we have this reverse gesture of water, which is kind of like the sad clown crying over it, right? Not feeling good about it, not being a fan of it, but also not really doing anything about it. Gestures don't, they can bring things to your attention. They can make a joke out of it. But this is sort of like self-deprecating humor, or maybe like passive-aggressive manipulative humor, or even just passive-aggressive manipulative kind of shit about the way that things ended up. And All right. So I'm pulling cards for every sign in the zodiac based on their rising sign. So I'm not giving any specific readings right now for individual people, but I do appreciate you being here. Depending on what your rising sign is, you might find the answer to your question. But yes, that's what we're doing right now. So thank you. Anyway, um, so the point is, because justice is upright, there is a situation you're dealing with this week where what's happened, for better or worse, is what is fair, is what is supposed to happen. However, there are not everybody is super stoked about the outcome. Some people are very sad or very upset with this outcome. And because justice is upright, we can say, well, according to the rules that have been set down, this is what was meant to happen. However, having the devil here is indicating, like, well, sometimes the letter of the law is not necessarily in line with the spirit of ethics or morality or value. The devil is being Capricorn or associated with Capricorn in the zodiac. Capricorn is a sign ruled by Saturn. It's the goat with the fish's tail. It's being able to navigate the material rules, the material restrictions, the material landscape of social life, of normal life, of just the world, in such a way that it's so artfully and gracefully done that it's almost like you're swimming through water, right? Like there are no obstacles, but it's not that. It's like, have you ever seen a mountain goat climb anything? Honestly, it looks like it shouldn't be. It looks mysterious, like it shouldn't be allowed to happen. Like it's like they're so good at climbing these very, very tiny little recesses. Anyway, so it's sort of like being able to navigate every single loophole and every single like rule or restriction or roadblock in such a way that it gives you what you want, but it doesn't really hold you accountable, or like it's technically fair but not really. This could be a situation where our vices kind of get in the way of the justice a little bit, right? We're like, technically we get what we need, or we get what we're supposed to have gotten. It's, it's just desserts when karma, or not karma, sorry, when justice shows up. It's really like that kind of especially if it's upright. It's like technically the letter of the law was maintained, right? Like the thing that was supposed to go based on the contract went the way it was supposed to happen. It's important to note that while justice is ideally informed by ethics and by some kind of spiritual moral compass and center, it isn't necessarily, right? These are all of the rules, these social rules that we agree to uphold for the pursuit of pursuing a greater social harmony. That's essentially what justice is. And how it's enacted and to what end, that depends, right? But the idea is that it's supposed to be more pleasant than just being lawless in the wild, right? That's why we build civilizations and why we implement systems of justice. Now, depending on your cultural system at a specific time, right, the king's justice is literally just the ability of the king to hold life or death in his hand, make a decision, be like, okay, you are wrong because of these rules that we have agreed on, we being usually the oligarchy or people in power. And because it's not been rebelled against, it's not been revised, we haven't, because this is the way that it is, then I get to decide you're guilty and we're giving you the axe, or whatever the situation is. So justice ideally is informed by morality, but it isn't necessarily beholden to morality, right? It's the letter of the law. It's the legal thing. It's the rules that we agreed to, the contracts. When Capricorn shows up, Capricorn is amazing at negotiating and weaving through contracts and dealing with that. Like Saturn is literally the lord of contracts. Saturn rules Capricorn. Capricorn is very adept at navigating the loopholes, that terrain of material reality, of what actually is going to fly and what actually is not. And so this does definitely seem to be a case of like, well, we're dealing with some situation where the letter of the law is upheld and things are technically good, but we don't feel good about it. And it's probably because it's not really in line with like what is good morally, what is uplifting. It's just sort of what was persuaded, what was argued to work. I mean, when I think of the devil, I think sometimes about his narrative capacities, like the prosecutor, right? And the ability to like make reasons for why something is evil or why something is bad. And that's not necessarily the end of the story, right? That's why we have a defender, because, everybody's complex and capable of both good and evil. But it's this idea of like really being able to, I don't know, to pick and choose what you want to pay attention to, and for some kind of material gain, right? It's being overly fixated on the material, physical, practical letter of the law, and not so much about these kind of emotional impacts that they might have. and if they're even good or not, right? And in history, in historical context, the jesters, the satirists, the writers, the artists, those were people giving critique of these social systems because they were more in line with the feeling, right? With this doesn't feel good, doesn't feel right. So even though the king or the judge may pass a verdict, you get like the gesture over here making jokes about it, making satire, making writings, exaggerating it to show the flaw in the logic, the flaw in the law. And because it's so, because gestures are in a position of such little political power in the direct way, they're often allowed, or they get away with saying things that other people couldn't get away with saying, right? Because, oh, it's just a joke. Oh, it's just me venting. It's just me crying about it. Like, it's not actually a thing. And yet those very same things are part of that greater movement to like uphold, and when I say uphold, here's the thing. Justice is not necessarily aligned with morality, but that's why it's a scale, right? We're constantly evaluating it, constantly adjusting it, because ideally we do want it to be in line with our cultural ethics and morality. And we want those ethics and morality to be good and uplifting and benefic and all of these nice things, which is why justice is ruled by Venus, right? The goddess of pleasure and love and harmony. We want those to be in line, but they aren't always. They fall in and out of balance. And so if something isn't going the way that we want or the way that we need it to go, we have to readdress those scales, those rules, those structures that we allow to lead our lives, and to bring into light these kinds of injustices that are being done in the name of justice, right? We say, oh, this is the law, so it has to be, but does it? We invented the law, right? We made that up. So if it's not serving our society as a whole, why are we doing it? So it's really interesting because, if you're a Leo rising, then that means that Mars is in your 12th house, which means like, yeah, maybe you made a decision and maybe you're just going with it. And there are a lot of people who are very unhappy about it. And in that 12th house space where you can't really see or address the problem, people are venting and people are upset. Or you could be one of those people venting and upset, but we're looking at your chart and it's happening in the 12th. So it's very likely that some kind of decision was made and that somebody's unhappy with that decision. So eventually, I guess I could look ahead and see when that will be. Let's see. I would think that when Mars goes out of Cancer and goes into Leo, which will be sometime around April. Oh, I hope it's not taxes, because taxes is another thing. Anyway, that I associate with justice because it's, a government thing. But anyway, when I see justice as a card, I think about rules and contracts that are meant to be in the name of Venus. They're meant to create harmony and fairness, equality, those things that feel good in a cultural context. But because they're letters, because it's a spell, if you will, it's a manipulation of intent and meaning, they can be exploited, right? You can find loopholes. You can find ways to take advantage of the system that the system was not really prepared to deal with. And then you have people who feel very badly about it. So, anyway, so that's just why that popped into my head, but I'm just honestly so worried about my own tax situation, which is probably why I'm thinking about that. Another thing I think about with the devil too is there's the song lyric. It goes like, the chains that I made in an attempt to be free. That's definitely the kinds of bondage we see with the devil, right? It's being like bound by by the material, right? Allowing your possessions to possess you, if you will. Being so caught up in like getting that job or getting that promotion or working within the institution, within the structure, knowing every nook and cranny, loophole and crevice of those social structures, that we kind of lose touch with this other side of reality, with this spiritual side, with this ethical, emotional side, with this psychological side. And so we become really fixated on like, I just need more money. I just need another car. I just need this or that. And we lose touch with like, I don't know, our relationships, the people that it's affecting, the way that it weighs on our morality. If we get something because even if it's technically legal, if we get something in a way that is sort of underhanded or nefarious, it weighs on our subconscious, right? It weighs on our on our psyche, our psychology. We think, oh, we are always really possessive and really like, is this ever going to be taken away, or like somebody's going to come after it? And we sometimes are like that because we don't feel we should have it in the first place, right? Because we feel like it's unfair that we have it. And so instead of acknowledging like, hey, maybe I shouldn't have pursued this so vigorously, or maybe there's some other considerations that I should have paid more attention to. Instead, there's this propensity to just be like, really kind of double down and really be protective of what we have instead of evaluating why we feel this unease about having it in the first place. So if you are Leo rising, this could be an issue. We do have Venus in the 11th house for, no, wait, sorry. I was looking ahead. So now we're not looking at your rising. 1 second. Venus is not there. Venus is in your 9th house. That's kind of funny because that also is a place where we might see feelings of justice or considering our beliefs, our philosophies, our thought patterns. So Venus being in the 9th is like, yeah, maybe we are thinking about how to be fair, how to be good, how to do good by those around us. And it's in the sign of Aries, which means it's being ruled by that Mars in the 12th. So there's some kind of like subconscious connection to it, like where there's some kind of conflict or unease in our subconscious self. There's some kind of conflict behind the scenes, and it's causing tensions with what we believe and how we can get the most benefic, pleasurable result out of those belief systems. And I'm pretty sure that's going to come to a head when Mars gets out of the 12th house and goes into the 1st. So that'll be interesting. Anyway, so it seems like this week we're going to be dealing with asking ourselves questions of value and worth and justice and fairness and harmony and how what is actually of value to us. And is it those shiny baubles that end up weighing us down, or is it the friends we made along the way, kind of a thing, right? So we're going to be really thinking about our relationships and putting that up against our actions, our belief systems, and like technically what is okay and what is actually good and decent to do by another human being, right? Okay, so now we have Scorpio. No, sorry. Now we have Virgo. Man, I'm really out of it. I wish we were on Scorpio. I need to drink some coffee. I need my coffee break. Okay. So Virgo rising. Virgo rising has the 10 of Wands reversed. So the 10 of Wands is the last card in the suit of fire. Before I said, okay, so the Ace of Wands is about that motivating, animating life principle that gets you out of your chair doing what you need to do because you're so passionate and driven to do it. As you crawl along your journey of the wands, you make friends, make enemies, you fight, you battle, you grow to consume, you allow that passion to carry you as far as it possibly can. And then you reach the 10. And the 10 is the burden of success, right? However hard this jaguar fought to get this prey, now he's got the burden of carrying it up the tree, protecting it from predators, making sure it stays his for as long as possible. There's a lot of work that goes into maintaining a success, right? Maintaining a crown, maintaining a position of authority, or whatever it was you were fighting for. The maintenance, the having of the thing, is often harder than the getting of the thing, right? It's easy to go out and chase and get a thing, or at least relatively easy. To keep that going forward and to have that whatever you have become fuel to continue fueling your success, that's a lot more nuance. It's a lot more difficulty, and it creates this kind of burden, right? It's sort of like, oh, I have this great idea with the Ace of Wands. I'm really motivated to go out and start my own business. Then you start up your business and things are going well or things are going hard or whatever, and then it's viable, but barely. And so now you're at this precipice where it's like, oh, now I have all of these new responsibilities that I did not have when I didn't have this business. Right now I have to care for my employees. I have to make sure the inventory is up. I have to do all the taxes. I have to, there's a lot that goes into maintaining the initial, maintaining the sustaining of the initial dream, of the initial endeavor, right? Not to accidentally rhyme, but, sorry, I didn't shuffle. Anyway, so we're going to draw one more card from the nameless one. So this week, we do see success, but we see success coming at the expense of some kind of burden. It's going to be a slog. It's going to be kind of difficult. There's going to be potentially a lot of problems, potentially a lot of unforeseen things that now need to be addressed. It is all in the sake of ultimate success, but we're about to kind of level up, right? Usually when we're about to level up, things get hard or things get stagnant. So depending on what you're dealing with, but the 10 of Wands is definitely an indication of like, yeah, we've kind of ridden this train as long as we can. We're going to have a new infusion of something if we're going to keep going. So let's continue for our Virgo risings into the nameless one. Oh my god. Okay, this is also the Ten of Wands. That is not quite the clarification I wanted. Okay, but it does definitely reinforce this idea that, like, yeah, if you're a Virgo rising for whatever reason, you're definitely going to feel like there's a weight on your shoulders, like you have to carry everything going forward by yourself. It's going to be very difficult, very arduous, and it is the result of some previously gotten success or level up, and it's just kind of an adjustment period, right? Now, interestingly, this 10 was upright and this 10 was reversed. So it looks like we're in a position where we can either, we're trying to decide if we want to get rid of some of these burdens, consolidate, maybe delegate, or maybe just abandon entirely, right? Like maybe we started our business, we started our idea, our creative thing. We're like 28 pages into writing a book, or 30 or 40 or 120. And we're like, hey, maybe it's not a good book. Maybe I should abandon the project, right? Probably seeing as we're dealing with tens, you're going to be more than 10 pages into a book, unless you're writing a children's book, in which case maybe you are almost done. But anyway, the point is though, it's looking like we're at this kind of decision-making point where we want to carry some of these burdens going forward. We want to continue along the track that we've been going, but it's too heavy and we do need to let some things go. This could be a position of like, okay, I've started a new business, but I need to hire somebody. I can't do it by myself anymore. This could be like, oh, I've started a new project, but that means I'm going to have to drop a couple of these other projects. It could also be like, hey, my creative business that I really love is getting really big, so I'm going to need to quit my day job, right? It's like I'm going to have to let some kind of thing go in order to make all of this work. We have, interestingly enough, the Three of Swords here. So there is some kind of contractual obligation, and it's going to feel really kind of not great, right? There's some kind of entanglement that's keeping us bound to all of these different obligations when really we need to relieve ourselves of some of this work. Hello, Hedwig. So nice to see you. I'm just giving everybody readings based on their rising sign. We are on Virgo rising right now, and it is looking like Virgo rising is going to have a time of it. So we got two different decks have said the Ten of Wands, one upright, one reversed. So we're definitely looking at a situation where we want to keep some of these burdens and responsibilities and obligations, but we have to let go of something. Something's going to give, right? We have some contracts involved, probably. Now, when I say contracts, I don't necessarily mean in writing, although that could be the case. We're looking at the Saturn ruled decan of Libra. And again, right, Libra is about boundaries and restrictions and sorry, no, that's Saturn. Saturn is about boundaries and restrictions, obligations, contracts, that kind of thing. The hard no, if you will. And Libra, ruled by Venus, is about, social harmony, diplomacy, justice, fairness, leading the intellectual, social charge because it's a cardinal air sign, so it's leading that energy. And then Venus, it's ruled by Venus because it's supposed to feel good, right? Ultimately, we want all of these decisions and all of these rules to give us the nicest, most Venus-like effect, right? To make things work smoothly and harmoniously and be fair and be fun. So we do have, the reason I'm saying that there's probably some contractual element, which could even just be as simple as saying like, hey, I told my best friend that I was going to be there for them and I can't, right? That's going to feel really bad. It brings up those associations of like, of heartbreak, of trauma, of betrayal that the Three of Swords is so often associated with, because when we break our promises, that feels really, really shitty. It feels shitty when somebody breaks their promises to you. It feels shitty when you can't uphold your end of the bargain. It just feels bad, right? And there's a lot of mental processing that then needs to happen for us to get over it and to learn something from it and to have something to like take away from that. So this is upright, and honestly, to me, in this context, that signifies that we're taking our promises and commitments very seriously, and that it's kind of a big deal, and that's part of the reason why we're struggling with this heartbreak right now, or with this like this intense burden, is because we kind of have committed perhaps to more than we could really sustain. And either way, it's going to feel kind of at least a little bit heartbreaking to have to let any of that go. So that's what we're going to be dealing with that week if you're a Virgo rising. Sorry about that. But ultimately, though, there's the burden of success, right? You work so hard, and every new level unlocks a plethora of new problems and new obstacles. So now we are on Libra rising. All right, Libra rising, what do we have for you? Okay, Libra rising has the upright Knight of Wands and the upright Nine of Pentacles. So that's fun. I'm going to go ahead and just move the astrology over a bit. So if you are a Libra rising, that means Venus is in your 7th house of partnerships, which is a good place for Venus to be. If you're in a romantic relationship right now, this can really be a spark of passion reintegrated into that relationship. This could be making time for your romantic partnerships. However, I will say one thing. The 7th house is also just intense partnerships or relationships of kind of any kind. It's sort of like somebody you're very, very close to that you have that one-on-one relationship with, that person can show up in your 7th, provided they're not your sibling, because that would be more in your 3rd. Yeah. So anyway, the point is, though, Venus being in your 7th house means, yeah, we got a lot of pleasant things to do with partnerships. This could also be about getting a new relationship if you're not in one. It's also a good time to just think about, what you want and what you like, how you can find pleasure in other people and in intimate relationships in general. If you do have a partner, this could also be good things happening to your partner, right? Some nice good Venus thing, a nice reward, a nice little treat, a nice date, whatever. The Nine of Pentacles is the Venus-ruled decan of the zodiac sign Virgo. Oftentimes it's concerned with perfectionistic optimization of system. It wants to maintain everything, keep everything running really smoothly. There's a sense of financial independence, because when we have Virgo, we have the Virgin, right? The Virgin is being removed from the partner. So we have this idea of like being able to stand on your own 2 feet alone and enjoying the fruits of your garden, whatever that garden looks like for you. So it's nice to have Venus like in your partnership house and also get the upright Nine of Pentacles, because really what that's kind of pointing at is like you don't need your partner, so you can just enjoy being with them, right? You're financially stable and you're able to stand up alone, which means that you don't have to rely on somebody else. You can just have fun with somebody else. You can have like a legitimate partnership and it's not one person carrying the other. So it's kind of neat to see that juxtaposition a little bit. And then we have the Knight of Wands. And the Knight of Wands is very much like a passionate problem solver, right? This is like gonna go out and solve all the problems as fast as possible and have a really fun, positive attitude doing it. And we're gonna have so much fun, guys. It's really good hype person, really good hype man. Somebody who's very encouraging and supportive. And it's supportive in like a fiery way, right? Like a passionate way. Like, you got it, babe. You can do it. Let's go do it together. Like, we're going to knock this out. The Knight is very, Knights go out and they quest, they solve problems. And when we're dealing with Wands, this is just like the pursuing of desire. So this could be somebody in your life who's very much about helping you pursue your desire, helping you do the thing you want to do, not because they want to do it, not because any other reason, but because, this is the thing we're focused on doing as a team, right? Like, we're going to knock this problem out. So it's a good hype person to have around, certainly. Seeing as we have that Venus in your 7th house, it's probably somebody you already know quite well. And that 7th house of Aries, no less, meaning that the people that you're attracted to tend to be people who are like fiery go-getters anyway. So you probably have a couple on hand. But yeah, big help and motivation, and also somebody to like enjoy the fruits of your labor with, right? And not in like a they're going to take resources from you kind of way, but more like, you work really hard on something and then they come over and they see it and they go, wow, that's amazing. Like, that's so cool. That's really great. Like, what else can we do? Like, can I help you solve something? Can I do something? Somebody who's very eager to like go out and help you in some way, shape or form. And then we got the nameless one coming in. And we got the Four of Cups. So the Four of Cups is the moon's decan of Cancer. This is about feeling sated, feeling satisfied, feeling like you have enough, and how those feelings wax and wane, because that is the natural tendency of desire, right? So say you're very hungry. No matter how much you eat at any given moment, you will eventually be hungry again, because that is the cycle of sustenance. That's just how it goes. The desire for food motivates you to get the food, you eat the food, and then eventually you get hungry, and so it continues. So when we deal with the Four of Cups, we're dealing with these situations where we're sated and we have enough. We feel good about it, but that feeling is kind of on a ticking clock. So enjoy it now, and definitely allow this moment to help you figure out what is your long-term goal. Like, what's the next step, right? Because if you're in a position where you have more than you need, then you're able to give some of that to somebody else, to your partner. Perhaps you're allowed to, like a rising tide lifts all sails, or whatever that saying is. It's like, if you have more than you need, then you can help other people get what they need to survive. If you have exactly enough, then you're very lucky indeed, right? Because we all should be so lucky, is to have exactly enough to feel completely sated and satisfied. So the Four of Cups is one of those cards, because it's very neutral, but it kind of veers a little bit towards and I do think that having the upright or reverse is a big effect on this card in particular as well, because this could be like, sitting in our gratitude, right? Feeling like we've won the crown and we feel really good about it. And I always think of the Princess and the Frog whenever I see the Four of Cups, which is why I illustrated it to be the little frog with the crown, because how satisfied must that frog feel when he's like, yeah, I got the golden ball for the princess, and now she's gonna invite me in her bed, and I'm gonna eat off her golden plate, and all of those nice things that fairy tale promised the frog. So for those of you who don't know that story, right, a princess loses her golden ball in a pond, and a frog gets it back for her. And then the deal is that the princess has to take the frog into her chambers, feed it her food, let it sleep on her pillow, all of these things. She gets the ball, but she doesn't want to do that. So she runs back home, and eventually the king makes her fulfill her promises. So the frog gets to eat off of this golden plate and sleep on this little silk pillow, but he asks her to kiss him or something like that. And she's revolted. And so she grabs him and throws him against the wall, and then he turns into a prince, and then she kisses him, and then they live happily ever after. Or in some of the more modern tellings, she just kisses him as a frog, and that turns him into a prince, and then they live happily ever after. But it's this idea of like that whole story being, she loses the ball, and she's so desperate to regain that which she had that gave her such fulfillment, that she makes these deals. And then meanwhile, the frog is also having the same cycle of like, if only I could eat off of this plate, if only I could sleep in silk sheets again, if only I could have a beautiful wife, then I would be satisfied, right? So really on both ends, it's this story of having what you need and then losing it, and then not feeling satisfied, going after it again, and then, getting into a position where you're satisfied again. There are lots of different ways, of course, to interpret that fairy tale, but that's one of them, and it's why I associate it with the Four of Pentacles. Sorry, Four of Cups. Why am I calling cups pentacles today? Anyway, and if you are interested in looking up more about how I personally interpret this fairy tale with this card, there's a significant write-up about it in my in the companion grimoire to the Nameless One, which is like a giant book that has a bunch of information in it. I'll just show you really quick, just to show you. This is the book that comes with the deck. It's small, but it'll get you through reading just fine. And then this is the grimoire that you can buy extra if you like. It's on my site, xiahunt.com. It's the Nameless One companion grimoire. It's literally huge. It's ginormous. And it's got, write-ups on every card and every suit and just a ton of stuff. I'll just turn to the four really quick. I'm obviously not going to read it out to you, but there's a full bleed of every illustration, and then it has a bunch of correspondences, and then I break down everything for like a little kind of quick reference guide page. And then it goes through and it breaks down every single symbol, and I talk about the inspiration of the symbol, how I interpret that, what that means in the context of the card, and it does that for every card. So that's the Nameless One grimoire. It has a ton of stuff in the back as well. And this is the first edition. We're still working on the first edition printing, like selling them through. Once this first edition is all sold out, it's going to be discontinued, and I'm going to make a second edition with some updates. So the second edition will have a totally different cover design, and it'll be different enough to warrant being a second edition. So if you're interested in limited edition books, I guess that technically makes the grimoire the first edition limited, because we're going to be totally redoing a bunch of stuff in here. So that'll be fun. Anywho, we still have them from our first printing, because that was a pretty big order. Okay, So that's what I see for you, my dear Virgo, right? No, Libra rising. We have some kind of passionate helper, passionate partner. We get to revel in the satisfaction of all of our efforts bearing fruits this week, and we get to contemplate our state of satedness, right? If we feel good, and if we don't, how do we get what we need? And you know, and from a place of like we have enough though, like we feel good about that. So that's nice. Okay, now we have, I'm gonna go ahead and move the thing. We got Scorpio rising. Scorpio, Scorpio. Oh wow, you got one already. Well, no. No, no, no. That was kind of weird, but no. Scorpio rising. Okay, Scorpio rising. What's going on this week? Okay, we have the reverse Ace of Swords. So we are not seeing things very clearly. If we are a Scorpio rising, and for whatever reason, we don't have all the information at hand, we are not seeing things very clearly. Perhaps the information is being hidden from us. The other thing too is we maybe are not speaking our truth, or somebody is not speaking up about something. Either way, this is probably not a good time to act on thoughts or act on ideas, as they may not have all the information we need. And then we also have the Death card. So this is a good time to engage in meaningful and deliberate acts of silence. Think about what's happening, really receive all of that information, and know that not everything is as it appears to be, and that we are on the precipice of a new transformation, and we may need to cut something out. So we might have to sever an old connection, an old relationship, an old idea. This is an air card, you know, so we're dealing with our mental capacities. We might have issues communicating with people. We might need to cut somebody out of our life, or even just for a minute, just stop communicating with them, because it's causing more confusion than it's causing clarity. So the Death card really is about, okay, so we're ending something, we're severing something, we're creating room for a new cycle to grow. And it can be very uncomfortable and sad, the way that death is uncomfortable and sad, but it is also the natural cycle of life, right? Sometimes we need to prune back. Sometimes things have to go to seed and germinate below the ground. Sometimes people have to die, they have to leave us and progress on to the next leg of their journey, whatever that means. So the Death card and all of its manifestations do symbolize, represent, I should say, some kind of letting go, moving on, transformation. And usually it has this kind of sad, sticky sort of feeling that goes along with it. Now, I will say something. The Death card is associated with the sign of Scorpio. So this is your card, and you're probably pretty used to this sensation, to this feeling of needing to prune back, let go, sever, connect, do something, transform in some way, ascend to some greater position or some greater path. But we're not quite ready yet. We don't have all of the information. So I would say sit with that silence and really observe, right? Use this opportunity to take note, not of necessarily everything that people say, but what they do, right? Really assess the situation and keep that mental guard up, because something about this week is not as clear as you would like, and it's not as obvious. Things are not what they seem to be. And whatever revelations that come from this observation is going to give you some kind of clue as to how to move to the next stage, or the next cycle of this development, and it's likely going to be to cut something or somebody out, particularly if that something or somebody is being dishonest. One of the things I see a lot with the reversed sword cards, but especially with the reversed ace, is trying to hide or cover up information, and that doesn't last all that long typically. Usually people have a pretty good idea of when they're being lied to, even if they can't exactly put their finger on it. So go with your intuition and don't be afraid to cut or sever relationships that are hindering you significantly. It's one thing to work through it and to remain loyal. And of course, as a Scorpio rising, you are known for that loyalty. But you also have to remember, like, loyalty is earned, right? You don't just give that out to people. So if somebody's not deserving of your loyalty, then you have to be willing to cut that out. Even if only temporarily, just give it a break, right? If you're suspecting that somebody doesn't have your best interest at heart, try going a couple weeks without talking to them and see how your life changes, whether for the better or for the worse. It doesn't have to be a permanent thing necessarily. And, sometimes it's not even malevolent, right? Sometimes people just drift apart. Their priorities differ. They start having different opinions about what their life needs to look like. And then we just need to let go and move on. So Scorpio rising is going to be dealing with that this week. We're going to got some new transformations, some new growth, some new developments. But of course, that means cutting some old things out. So that's not always pleasant. Okay, now we have Sagittarius rising. Sorry if I'm going a little bit faster, but I'm getting very tired. Maybe next time I should try starting with like Pisces and going the other direction so that we can start with the signs that don't get. Oh, you know what I should do? I think from now on, if I do this horoscope thing, maybe I'll start with the sign whose like month it is or something, like since it's literally the sun is in Pisces, maybe I should start with Pisces and then go on from there. Since it is a wheel, could do that. So that could be fun. Or I could pick a planet like Venus, whoever sign Venus is in and go from there. Of course, that would have given us Aries anyway. But I don't know. I guess the sun ingress is usually what people use. Okay, so plus then it's like if it's your birthday, you get to go first. Anyway, that'll be fun. I think maybe I'll do that. That sounds great. Yeah, because I'm like always so exhausted when I get to the end. So I think that's not really fair to like always be giving Pisces my most tired reading. So I think I'll just start doing the horoscopes from wherever the sun is at and then move on from there. Happy birthday to all the Pisces, by the way. Happy birthday month. Okay. So we are looking not at Pisces. We are looking at Sagittarius rising. So let's get that straight. Oh, hey, look, we got the Fool. Some other cards turned over. We got Death. Dude, like, why are so many cards turned over right now? I must have accidentally grabbed a bunch and put them the wrong direction, but that's kind of cool. I get like a whole little... Never done a reading that way, but I don't know. Seems relevant, so we're going to just pull them out. Wow, I must have grabbed a big chunk. Okay. We're not going to give all of these cards the same space. Don't worry. That wouldn't be fair. That wouldn't be fair to everyone else, but I do want to look at them because I feel like there are no accidents. We've got some reverse players, some lovers, that reverse ace of swords again, and the sun, and the 7 of cups, and the 10. Lots of like severing and also like relationships and a lot of confusion and a lot of letting go, right? We've got a bunch of like, okay, so there's like for union, but then there's these 2 reversed court cards. So somebody's not acting super great. And then there's this reversed ace again of swords. So that's confusion with communication, with thoughts, not knowing what's what. Then we've got the sun, so wanting illumination, clarity, things being revealed, but also like generally, joy, play. And then the 7 of cups is always a sign of confusion because nothing is ever as it seems with the 7 of cups, that's for sure. We've got the 10 of swords, which is, that goes in line with death and with this whole severing thing. That also goes in line with the reverse 9 of wands and also with the 8 of cups and the 5 of swords, because this is like we're leaving in pursuit of something better, or we're trying to cut something off to get something better, to get something that is more stable, more gives us more cause to celebrate, with family, right? Even though the backdrop for this is very turbulent, very confusing. It's probably causing a lot of confusion, all the destruction and all the change that's been happening lately. Anyway, okay. So, but for my Sagittarius risings, I'm going to mostly focus on the Fool and Death, and what an interesting combination that is. So the Fool is about this leap of faith, right? This is literally like the leap of faith from the ending of one cycle to start a new beginning, to start a new adventure. I think this reminds me of this proverb. I think it's like a Zen Buddhist proverb. I'm not totally sure, but it's something like, "Oh, there's a guru and a young apprentice, and the apprentice says something like, "Well, how do you cope with the fear of death, or like how do you let go of that fear?" And then the teacher, the guru, says something to the effect of, "Oh yes, death is a marvelous adventure, but the fear will spoil it for you," or the fear will surely spoil the adventure, or something like that. But it's basically like, we can focus on what we're afraid to let go of, and we can focus on the things that we know and the things we like about what we know. But there's a way to reframe certain things so that it's like we're excited to experience something new, right? And this is an upright fool. The fool is about that leap of faith, right? The leap into the unknown to begin the story, to begin the adventure. And it's really interesting because beginning one adventure is essentially killing off the end of the other one, right? Like, and how many fairy tales or stories in general do you see where there's this young adventurer and their story begins because their caretaker, their previous life in some way dies, right? The evil king lays siege to the village and their aunt and uncle who had been raising them is dead, or the cow dies that was giving them the milk and they need to go off and find some other means of survival, or the father dies and so the evil stepmother is now in charge and she sends her stepdaughter off into the frost, and she has to go into Baba Yaga's hut or whatever. Like, usually there is some kind of instigating force that perpetuates, I shouldn't say, that propels the fool into that journey. And whether or not the protagonist is excited about it, it's kind of like it has to happen because what has been is closed off, right? There's no coming back from death. So whatever was, whatever has died, there's nothing there for you anymore, right? You just have to move on. There's something else. Um, and so being really excited about that process, at least when if it's already happened, like, you can't go back in time, right? Essentially every moment is already dead. Right? It's already in the past, it's written in stone, it can't be grown, it's just it's unchangeable at that point. So that leaves us with the ability, the opportunity to really look forward to what is still growing, to what we can interact with, what we can manipulate and go forward and, adventure onwards or whatever. I mean, I like to use plant metaphors because usually when, you only die once, but you have a lot of different endings in your life. So the chances of the death card being an actual literal death aren't very high. Usually what happens is there's some part of you that is dead that now is making room for a new part of you to grow and to continue this journey forward. So such as, you're no longer a child, right? The child is dead and the adult emerges. um, these kinds of transformative periods in our lives where we have to let go of a part of ourselves or a part of our lives, leave it behind, and then grow forward into whatever it is we're supposed to be now. You quit your job. Like, let's say you were a lawyer for 10 years and now you're not being a lawyer anymore. That's the death of you as the lawyer. And now it's the birth of you as, I don't know, the artist or something, whatever it is you wanted to do. So that requires this leap of faith, and it's leaping away from this old, stagnant, whatever has been, right? And this can be very peaceful and cathartic, or it can be very scary and chaotic. But at the end of the day, we have to move on. We have to go forward. Um, Oh, Hedwig is a Pisces sun. Happy birthday month. Yay. Well, so then maybe next week on next Wednesdays we'll start with Pisces, and then and then you won't have to wait till the very end. But anyway, yeah. So for our, what are we on? Sagittarius rising is who I'm talking to. So for our Sagittarius risings, right, there's some part of ourselves, some chapter of our lives that is laid to rest, and we need to go on to the next leg of that journey, and it's going to require a leap of faith. So, take your time to come to terms with it, to mourn that loss of yourself, the loss of your inner child, the loss of your, I don't know, of your old career, of your old path, of your old ways of looking at things and thinking about things, because we're about to begin something new. And that new thing, it's probably going to be big. So I will say, if you're a Sagittarius rising, the astrology is really interesting for you because, well, okay, let me back up. The astrology is interesting for everybody, but right now there's so much stuff in Pisces. So if you're a Sagittarius rising, that's all in your fourth house, which means your house of home, environment, your roots, where you come from. And so some of these things that are in this Pisces right now, in this Pisces sign, Are like the Sun, Mercury, Saturn, and the North Node. So this is a lot of stuff about like thinking and illuminating areas of the home, areas of where you come from, of the restrictions and the setbacks that have kind of been there, and I've been, oh, I don't know, planted, let's say, for kind of a while. Saturn is a slow mover and he's been in Pisces for a minute. Home would normally be a place of, because it is the other Jupiter ruled sign, and Sagittarius is a Jupiter ruled rising. So home normally would be this great place of healing and connection and empathy and spiritual uplifting and all of those nice Piscean traits, right? But right now, because Saturn's been in it, we're realizing the limitations of our spirituality, the limitations of faith, the limitations of belief, the restrictions. We also have the North Node here with Saturn, and that's really interesting because it's like we're so hungry for that miracle, for that nice Pisces, benefic, dreamlike miracle. And yet at the same time, we're suffering all of these like setbacks with our faith, with our and particularly with like the root of these things, because for you it's your fourth house, and your fourth house is really where you come from and your foundations, and that's literal as in your home, your real estate, your physical environment, your dwelling, but it's also like in your past, right? So it's back now, so hopefully you guys can all see me and hear me, but I'm gonna move on because I'm worried the connection's gonna drop out. I don't know why it always seems to do that to me. Okay, so anyway, the point is, if you're a Sagittarius, sorry, somebody just called. Are you guys back? Are you back again? Sorry, I'm like in the middle of my live and I don't know why. I have do not disturb turned on, and yet still I always get calls in the middle of my live every time. Okay, anyway, I'm going to go ahead and move on to, we are going to be in Capricorn rising right now. So, Capricorn rising. What do we have going on this week for you? Okay, we have the King of Cups. Nice. And then I'm going to pull a card from the Nameless One, since we were supposed to be doing that this whole time, but then Litha got really chatty and a bunch of cards were always flying out. Okay. Interesting. So we have the King of Cups and we have the reversed Six of Pentacles and Two of Pentacles, or coins if you'd rather. So this is an interesting card. This is Jupiter's decan of the zodiac sign Capricorn, which this is actually where my degree of rising is, but that's not really relevant to anybody else. But the point is, this is about managing our material resources to give us the best possible explosion or expansion, I should say, of results. So, like plant metaphors are really beneficial for the suit of pentacles more often than not, but, you have a seed, right? And the seed inside of it has everything it needs to be, whatever it's meant to be. The tree, the shrub, the flower, whatever. But it's not enough to just have the seed. You have to put the seed in the exact perfect conditions, as perfect as you can make them, in order for it to maximize on its potential growth, right? If you have a seed for a flower that loves the sun and you plant it in the shade, it doesn't matter how much potential that seed has, it's going to struggle. At the very least, it's going to struggle because it's not in the environment that is conducive to its growth. Same thing, right? You have a tree that loves the desert, but you plant it in a rainforest, right? It's not going to grow the way that it could because it's not getting the right mixture, the right balancing of the material resources. So the Two of Coins is definitely like, yes, balance your checkbooks, and yes, work and play and make time for both of those. But it's also, it's a deeper management of your material resources and thinking about where you start a project, where and when and with what resources that ultimately will allow it to totally be overcome with growth in the future. So Jupiter wants to make things really, really big and really vibrant and beautiful and wonderful, right? Jupiter's a benefic. He likes things to be big and beautiful. And, well, in Jupiter's case, it's really more like big and full of mirth and joy and spiritual uplifting and all of those great things. So when we're dealing with Capricorn, that's the Saturn ruled sign. That is a Saturn ruled sign. And Capricorn is about the structure of the real material world and navigating that structure and understanding the rules. So when we're looking at Jupiter's decan of Capricorn, we're really looking at Jupiter trying to figure out how can we work within the rules and restrictions of whatever exists currently to maximize our growth and spiritual evolution and what's the word, like uplifting, right? Jupiter wants to raise, wants to expand and elevate is I think the word I'm looking for. So anyway, when we look at the Two of Coins, like there are a bunch of different facets and areas that we need to manage resources to make this work, right? Because yeah, our physical environment is a huge one. It doesn't matter how much we want to grow our nice witchy pagan business if we set up shop in the middle of an environment that is like really hostile to that spiritual belief system. That's not necessarily going to lead to a lot of growth, right? Or if it is, it's going to be very difficult and you're going to struggle a lot. In the same way, like we need to balance our time, our work and our play, right? If we're always working, then that's a mismanagement of resources also, because we don't have enough time to rest, to recuperate. It's sort of like, so let's say, okay, we have a plant and the plant loves the sun, right? But if it's only ever in the sun constantly, it still can do poorly, right? It still can fry. A lot of flowers, like heliotrope, for example, is one of my favorite flowers, and it literally is named after the sun. It loves the sun. But if it doesn't get a little bit of shade, it still is going to have a hard time, even though it does naturally enjoy the sun, right? Because it's about balance. It's about a ratio, a certain amount that works for that particular plant's preferences. So when we deal with the Two of Pentacles, we're looking at what are your specific preferences? Like what do you need to do, or where do you need to be, or what kinds of things do you need to have in order to maximize your potential for growth? And because it's the two, we're beginning that journey, right? Which essentially is like, okay, yeah, let's pick where we're gonna set up shop. How are we gonna begin that phase? And then we have the reverse Six of Pentacles, and the Six of Pentacles oftentimes is about generosity. It's about giving. It's about nurturing and sustaining the community as well as the individual. When it's reversed, we see that there's a lack of help, a lack of generosity, or that offers of generosity are made with kind of strings attached, right? Sometimes I see this as being like, oh, somebody gave you a lot of capital, but they expected a return on investment, but they didn't necessarily specify that. And so it becomes a little bit like, instead of just being a generous gift, it becomes kind of a burden, or it becomes an issue where you have to really work on how to manage it correctly. And then we've got this King of Cups. So we do have somebody who is an authority in the realm of emotions, who is able to kind of help navigate these things. Because I do tend to read court cards as being other people, then there's someone you can go to, someone you can talk to, who can help you pick the best location and manage your resources in a way that you don't need to rely on other people's help or loans, especially considering the fact that they're probably not in good faith at this time. The reverse Six of Pentacles isn't great if you need to rely on other people to do a thing. So on the one hand, there's somebody who can help you insofar as directing you, giving you the emotional support or the guidance that you need, because it's an upright king. Normally, kings are the people who are asking for return on investment, but in this case, it could be a situation where you want help and they can only offer you so much, or it could be a situation that's kind of not related to this upright king, but it's still something that you're dealing with, or maybe the reason that you go to them for help. But definitely there's some kind of like, there may be a draining of material resources, or there may be like wanting to give back but not knowing how or how much, or needing help from others but not quite knowing how to get there or how to ask for that help. And there's someone in a position of emotional and relationship kind of authority who can help you in that direction. So that's also my rising sign. So to be honest, I don't totally love to see the reverse of Six of Coins, but especially because all of my projects are like crowdfunded and are basically built on the back of other people's help. But it is what it is. The seasons, they turn and they do what they will. Plus, I'm not super worried about it because that Two of Pentacles is very like, exploratory. It's like thinking, oh, this might not work long term. If the help dries up, I might need to relocate, or I might need to figure something else out. And needing to have like a frank conversation with somebody in a position of authority and control that can, at the very least, who maybe needs to just be aware and be like, hey, things have been okay so far because I've been relying on this help and it's been okay, but it's drying up. So we need to figure out a different plan. Sometimes you can talk to people, and sometimes they're even reasonable. Having an upright king is nice because chances are, if you're dealing with somebody specific, they're at least willing to hear you out, which is nice. Okay, so Aquarius rising. We have Aquarius rising. Oh, we have the Chariot. Nice. If you're an Aquarius rising, it's looking like you are experiencing a rare moment of inner and outer unification, which will propel you forwards into victory. So the thing about the Chariot that I think goes unsaid is like, yeah, it's about control, victory, dominance, succeeding. It's definitely a good card. It's auspicious if you're trying to do something or accomplish something. But the thing that isn't said enough is that the Chariot's association with Cancer mean that it's the domicile of the moon, right? It's about getting what you need, and that's why you're able to be successful and go forward. Getting what you need and being able to harmonize the two aspects of yourself that are so rarely in unison, which is your subconscious mind and your conscious mind, right? What you need is what you want is what you need. And so going after those things becomes very easy, or I should say relatively easy, because you're so much more efficient, right? You're united. You're not fighting a battle on every side. You're not internally divided. So you're able to go and externally yield great rewards. But it's associated with Cancer, and it's an emotional card, right? The Chariot is like, you have your shit together. That's why you're successful. So it's not necessarily like a magic wand, you get whatever you want. It's like, hey, you're really focused, you're really determined. And the reason that is because you're not conflicted, right? You're in unison. Your subconscious, the things that are hidden, the universe at large, these mysterious kinds of other things that are sort of you, but also not sort of you, they happen to be in alignment with what you're actually writing, what you're actually controlling, manipulating, what you're consciously striving towards. So that's a real big, like, having the wind at your back kind of a thing. And, if you're lost in the wild unknown of the sea, right, having the wind in your sails is a huge help. And that's kind of what the Chariot experience is. It allows you to take your soul where it needs to go because there's no friction. They're united, right? The horses aren't running in different directions. They're going in the same way, trying to accomplish the same goal. So that's nice. Always love to see that. The internal and external unification of the self and the subconscious, there's a lot that can be done with that kind of power. A lot indeed. And, Pluto is in your rising sign, and it will be for 20 years. So I think it's going to be fun. You should observe the next 20 years with that in mind. Because, Pluto is very new. It's a modern thing. And we kind of owe it to the people coming after us to study its astrological effects and see if they are, in fact, aligned with our supposed associations. I've definitely experienced like aspects to Pluto, transits to Pluto that seem to have been very much in line with what they propose. So, but there's other things, right? And there's a lot of like other timing techniques and stuff that could be used and overlaid to explain that even without Pluto. But I don't know. I find it very interesting to observe the outer planets, or the more modern planets of Pluto, Uranus, and Neptune, because on the one hand, traditional astrologers, there's a lot of criticism for the inclusion of those guys, given that the framework of astrology for using the 7 sacred planets that you can see with the naked eye have been so effective for like 2,000 years. There's a big tradition, and a lot of the logic that comes into the construction of astrology is used with those 7, and obviously not using Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. But having those in the time period that we have them is also very revealing and very interesting. And like, you can look at like Chris Brennan has a huge podcast. Like he's got like over like hundreds of episodes of podcast stuff. And when he talks about, and he also like literally wrote the book on Hellenistic astrology, which is why I'm bringing it up. It's called Hellenistic Astrology by Chris Brennan, right? And so when he talks about Pluto, it's very interesting because he definitely like has the benefit of knowing a lot about both modern and traditional astrology. And I think that's kind of the way to handle it, like looking at it and not dismissing it out of hand, but also kind of thinking like, well, astrology was an established system for like 2000 years before that. So you would definitely pay more attention to the planets we can see. And that's kind of the sympathetic note, right? The sympathetic magic. Like you can see it with your eye. It's in your perspective. Saturn, you'll experience, if you live a relatively long life, you'll experience 2 Saturn returns by the time you're like 60, around there. And so that's really the limit of like what you can see in your lifetime, is having these cyclical courses. So, so it's interesting to see like, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto is having their foot in pies that you'll never really see the fullness of it, right? Like you'll never get a full cycle of that in your life. So you're kind of handing the torch over to the next generation. So if you collect data for astrology, it's good to know. I think it's good to like pay attention, because eventually, 2000 years from now, maybe we will have a lot of information and a lot of data about these other planets, and maybe they will be quite useful in the practice of astrology. So that's my way of looking at it anyways. I like traditional astrology, traditional Hellenistic astrology. There's a lot to work with there. But I don't like throwing things off the table either. So anyway, so it's very interesting. Also, if you guys could if someone could add in the chat if you're still hearing me, because it just occurred to me that hasn't updated, and I did have a call in the middle of it, so I'm hoping that it didn't like kick me off or anything. Anyway, okay, so I'm just going to assume it hasn't. One more card for Aquarius rising. Okay, you're hearing me. Thank you, Hedwig. I really appreciate that. Nothing worse than screaming at a void, All right, Aquarius rising. All right, and we have the Seven of Swords. So even though you have this amazing power to move forward and do the thing you really want to do, make sure to be vigilant and use subtlety when needed, right? Discretion may be advised. You might want to sniff the wind and make sure that the trajectory you're setting yourself up for is in fact what you want, and not only what you want, but what is going to be fruitful for a long time, set you up for success. Is not just like a short instant gratification kind of a thing. And the reason I say that is because if you have the Chariot, you're probably in a position where you can get what you want. But if you have the Seven of Swords, you might want to make there might be some subtleties at play, and you don't want to overlook them. When the Seven of Swords shows up, yes, this can be trickery, deceit, betrayal, backstabbery, sabotage, right? All of these kind of subtle tricks against you. But it can also just be subtlety in general. It can be working through imposter syndrome. It can be feeling like a thief or a crook without actually being that. Or it can just be sniffing the wind, figuring out where you want to stick your allegiances without actually declaring anything, so that you can put yourself in the most advantageous position. And it doesn't have to be nefarious. It can just be good old-fashioned strategy, right? You want to make sure that you're putting yourself in a position for success. So before you go, blazing trails and whatever the fuck, I don't know, pushing onwards, just make sure to double check your map, right? Make sure that your allies are behind you actually. Make sure that you really see clearly what you want, and that what you want is not just a fleeting moment of victory, but setting the stage for a long-term haul. You want something to work well into the distant future. And so you're going to have to be careful of a saboteur, right? Saboteurs, intentional or otherwise, right? Sometimes it's not a malicious thing. Sometimes it's just overlooking something that is kind of critical to your success getting away, right? We've got this little polecat, and she's really vigilantly protecting her sacred daggers and her treasure, and she's caught a lot of little thieves in the past, but one escapes, So just be on the lookout. Also, when you're put into positions of success, sometimes people are jealous, and sometimes they have a thing to say about it, not always, but just maybe if you keep your victories, maybe don't announce them. Maybe just be like, yes, I got that, and then keep going. Don't let it distract you. It's really interesting too, because right behind it, we have the upright Three of Pentacles. So there is some kind of collaboration or group project. We don't want resentments to build. Maybe that's it. Oh yeah, that's it. Because then we got this fucking, Seven of Wands again, where we're battling over egos and resources. So, like, yeah, you'll probably be victorious, but maybe don't announce it. Try to keep in mind the feelings of the team, try to be diplomatic, and try to be strategic. You know, you're gonna win, but now it's a question of how you're gonna win, right? What the collateral might be. You don't want to get in a position where you win technically, but the damage is so severe to your reputation or to yourself or to your allies that it basically is paramount to defeat. You don't want to be in one of those positions. So you got a lot of power. Now you have to figure out how to use it responsibly. And now we're on to Pisces rising. Finally, happy birthday, Hedwig. Finally, you get to hear your horoscope. Although I will be writing a much more in-depth monthly horoscope upcoming for what's the next month? March. January, February, March. I always have to do the whole thing in my head or I don't know it. Anyway, yeah, so on my Patreon you can get monthly horoscopes, and I think I'm going to switch over to a video format and then just have the transcripts also available, because I think I will be able to get a lot more done that way. I mean, last time we pulled some cards for just the week ahead, and I spent 4 hours going through everybody's signs, so I feel like if I get in depth, it's going to be a lot, you know, especially because we get to look at the whole month, and that will be really fun to like be able to just say what I'm seeing and not have to worry about spelling things incorrectly. Anyway, Pisces rising. Oh, or maybe you're just a Pisces sun, so maybe I'm misinterpreting that, but anyway. Okay. So for Pisces rising, we have the 5 of Cups and we have the 8 8 of Swords reversed. Sorry, I need more coffee. My throat is so itchy. All right. So, you know, this is not surprising. I told you guys how there's a bunch of shit in Pisces, right? That, you know, the Sun and Mercury and Saturn and the North Node and Neptune are all in Pisces at this moment. And that's a lot. That's a lot of stuff that's just like brought to you, you know. With the Sun in Pisces, we're looking at clarification and illumination about the self, about the first house stuff, right? With Mercury, we're talking about that, we're expressing that, we might be exchanging that, we might be engaged in barterings or negotiations of some point. And with Saturn, we're looking at restriction. And Saturn has been in your rising sign for a hot minute. And so it will be this year, Saturn is going to be leaving Pisces and going into Aries. But that's not going to happen until, let me see, when does that happen? I'm going to move ahead the chart by a matter of months, I think. So Saturn is going to go into Aries. Oh, in like June, around June. I did skip ahead through months, so give or take a couple days. I guess I could go back and find the exact day. Man, Saturn moves so slow. Okay. So that's it then. Saturn is going to be in Pisces in May, and then May 24th, and then by May 25th, Saturn is going to be in Aries. Anyway, though, I am really sorry to say this, but Saturn going from your first house might be a relief in terms of restrictions you felt about your identity or like your place in the world or what you're supposed to be here to do. But it's going to be going from your first house into your second house, and having Saturn in your second house is not going to feel great either. But I like to think of Saturn as kind of like construction. It's sort of like all of the delays and setbacks that have to happen because something is growing or something is building. Oh, what are you referencing for planet movements? An app? Yes, I am referencing an app called Ephemeris, and it's really good for your iPhone or your iPad, which is what I'm looking at mine on. And then I have another app that's called, what is this one called? It's called like Planeto or something like that. I can't see it because I have it split screened, but basically it's for tracking the planetary hours. So I can see like what the chart is, and I can move it up ahead or back. And what's really nice about Ephemeris is that you can pay one lump sum and just have access to it instead of doing a monthly subscription. I really try to find things like that because subscriptions are difficult for me to remember. So just being able to pay like a higher fee up front and then have it forever is way more useful for me personally. But that's what I use. And so you can go forward or backwards in time. You can look at the chart of the hour. You can put charts of the people you know into the app, and then you can also overlay transit charts onto those charts, so you can see the natal chart and the transit chart of the hour at the same time, which is kind of cool, and then move that backwards or forwards. So I find it has a lot of flexibility for an app, and it kind of does all of the stuff that like the heavier, more well-known software does. um I mean, I shouldn't say all of the stuff. It doesn't give you like interpretations of anything. It just shows you like what's happening. So it's not that kind of an app. But some of them I think can actually give you interpretations, but I don't use those really anyway. Um, so anyway, but yeah, so that's what I recommend it. I like it so far. Not sponsored, just a fan. I will say that it's clearly made by just like a person, because when I contacted help for something, they were a little bit abrupt and kind of rude about it, but I don't know. It's fine. Running stuff is hard, and it's probably difficult to know so much about your app and then get a bunch of dumb questions all the time from people who don't know how to use a computer, which is me. But anyway, it's a really good app. I like it a lot. And I really, really like that you don't have to pay a subscription. So anyway, but yeah, that's what I'm using. So at any point, at any rate, so Saturn going from your first house into your second probably doesn't feel great. Right now, Venus is in your second house. When Venus was in my second house, I definitely got more pretty objects and like stuff that I liked around me, but it was because I was going out and splurging on myself, right? Like buying jewelry or buying fancy coffees or whatever. So Venus in your second house does feel good, and it is pleasurable, and a lot of times it can result in like getting stuff. Like when I went out, I basically, when Venus was in my second house, dude, I went out to get an artisanal coffee like every day. And I love to go out to cafes and get coffees, but it's something I try not to do like super all the time because it's expensive, it adds up. And when Venus went into my second house, I was like, fuck it, life's hard. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna get like a $5 coffee every day. I don't fucking care. So it was really easy to prioritize pleasure over other things. So just be careful not to overdo it, because when Venus is in your second house, like shopping sprees might be a thing that happens to you. It feels good in the moment, but it might not be all that great long term. And you have Saturn in your first house, so you might feel really restricted anyway, and that might kind of almost make you want to do more fun things, or like just be over it, right? Sometimes when we feel really restricted or really down on ourselves or kind of like depressed, we were like, you know what, fuck it, I'm gonna buy the coffee, I'm gonna buy the jewelry, I'm gonna go out and have fun, I'm gonna like spend time with my friends, even when what you really need is to like sit down and manage your finances, or like, I don't know, clean your house or whatever, all of those nice Saturnian things you don't want to do. I mean, I guess cleaning a house is kind of a lunar thing because it's like making the nesting place nicer, but I don't know. I think it depends on how your chart is configured. Anyway, the point is, all of the things that you are duty bound to do, that you're responsible for doing, all of the restrictions and the setbacks that you have to like deal with, those Saturnian things being in your first house all the time, might make this particular Venus transit more like explosive than usual, even though for you, your second house is Aries, so it's always going to be kind of explosive and impulsive. But I think probably more so because it's almost like you're rebelling against the part of yourself that feels like you shouldn't or can't or don't deserve. That's a big thing with Saturn. But at any rate, it's interesting though. I think that mostly we have these cards because this is very obvious to me. Saturn in Pisces feels like the pressure of the deep sea over you. It feels like depression, feels like being restricted, having your faith questioned, feeling like you're limited in some kind of big existential way. And Pisces as a rising sign, like I always say, okay, everybody's got a semi-permeable spiritual membrane, right? Where we just like let in certain things through osmosis, certain things go through us. Some of those things are emotional wavelengths of other people. Wherever Pisces is in your chart, that's an area where your semi-permeable barriers are way more permeable, right? That's like a really good access point for shit to get into you. Because Pisces is so like being in the ocean where every single thing is connected to every single other thing. It's why people with prominent Pisces placements tend to like absorb the anxieties and the fears of other people, right? They kind of like read the room really well intuitively. And sometimes that's good, but sometimes it's like creates a lot of anxiety that isn't yours, taking a lot of emotional responsibility for like other people. and what they're going through, feeling all of the suffering in the world all at once, as though it were your own, particularly if it's Pisces rising, because then all of that semi-permeableness is just you, right? It's just like your where you're starting from in your perspective. How you're, when your soul incarnate in this body, in this earth, and what you're meant to do and how you do it, it's kind of like your rising sign is like starting from go. So when your rising sign is Pisces, that means that your starting point is very compassionate and empathetic and already prone to let in all of the energies all around you. And Saturn being there can be kind of depressing, right? It can, because Saturn already is known for like isolation and being, alone and removed, and also hard and cold, and distant. It's that really stone cold and no. Like, I want all of the world to be happy and to be harmonious, and for all of the hungry mouths to be fed. And then Saturn is that big no. No, that doesn't happen. It's really heartbreaking. Saturn can be really hard to deal with. And when Saturn's in your rising, that's going to be like your identity, right? You're going to say, I want to be somebody who's spiritually uplifting. I want to be somebody who's compassionate always and who's always there for everybody and who everybody loves. And I want to be somebody who's blah, blah, blah. And then Saturn comes into your rising and says, no, that you don't get those things. You don't get to be that. At least not all the time. So Saturn in your rising is kind of hard, and I'm sorry. I have Saturn in my second house natally. It's also kind of hard. I mean, that's the thing about astrology, right? Everybody has a Saturn, everybody has a Mars, and there's not really a great place for them to be. When we're dealing with our own natal charts, we get a whole lifetime to work through that mess and to turn it into our advantage, right? Because there are obviously benefits to having Saturn in your first house if that's your natal placement. You get a whole lifetime to figure out how to reap the virtues of Saturn and how to mitigate those harsh, malefic tendencies, right? But with a transit, you don't get a whole lifetime. You get like a couple years. You know what I mean? If it's Saturn, if it's other planets, you get even less time. So usually transits are more like something happens to you. And then that causes this chain reaction depending on how your personal chart is configured, that kind of like changes or transforms or grows your emotional, inner, psychological, spiritual framework in some way. That's how I view transits. That's my personal take on it. So, unlike a natal chart where there's not really exactly a good placement and a bad placement, it's more like this is a very complex alchemy that leads to a very complex expression of a human soul. And throughout their life, there's going to be an unfolding of all of these different events. And some of them will be very hard, but some of them will be very rewarding. Transits aren't necessarily like that. They're more like these events happen and they trigger these internal responses. So the event that's happening to you is feeling, sad and depressed, and like we have to let go of things, and like there you can't get the things that you desire or the things that you need, and that you're having trouble like seeing a way out. The nice thing is that having this reversed actually means that we are starting to poke our head through and see things with a little bit more of an optimistic light. And what's nice about that is Jupiter, your chart ruler, if you're a Pisces rising, Jupiter has just recently gone direct. So we would expect to see things start to be better, start to be more clear. What's really fun about this is that the Eight of Swords is actually the Jupiter ruled decan. Yeah. Oh my gosh. The Jupiter ruled decan of Gemini, which is where Jupiter is right now in the sky. Jupiter is not in Jupiter's decan, but it is in Gemini. So overall, I think the decans do a really good job of painting the expression of like what that sign and planet combination looks like, even if it's not in that specific decan spot, because that's only a 10-degree, little area. At least, yeah, let me check and make sure. Yeah, Jupiter is now in Mars's decan of Gemini, which is the Nine of Swords, if you're interested in knowing that. But at any rate, so Jupiter in Gemini has this problem where there's like 1,000 million little things that all want to be bigified and elevated. Jupiter in Gemini has trouble knowing what to believe, what to place faith in. Gemini is really good at experimenting with different thoughts. With having like these mental thought games, right? But belief isn't really something that can be like logicked out a lot of the time. It's kind of like, well, for the gaps in between logic, you have faith and you choose a course and you just go, right? That's kind of what faith and belief are there for, is to fill the gaps and to help people go and just, believe that things will work out, that they'll be okay. That's one of Jupiter's kind of blessings, is that he gives the faith to just take it like it is, and believe that things will be okay and that they'll work out. In Gemini, there's a billion different little scenarios, a billion different ways things could go work out, and a billion different ways they could fail. And it really puts a magnifying glass on every single tiny small data point that Gemini brings to the table, which is why Jupiter struggles there. There's only so much Jupiter to go around, And if Jupiter expands all of these potentials, you get even more to deal with. Then you get this feeling that the Eight of Swords is really indicating, which is feeling stuck, feeling trapped by your ideas, by your thoughts. You have so many thoughts, so many ideas, so many potentials and options that you're totally trapped. You're like paralyzed. You don't know what to act on or how to think or what to believe or any of it, because there's just so much to choose from. It's like information overload. When this is reversed, we start kind of poking our head out and we start thinking like, okay, it's time to prune back some of these ideas. Not all of these are created equal, right? Some things are good and we should act on them and take them seriously. And some things maybe are fun for thought experiments, but little else. And we should just leave them behind. Particularly since, we're dealing with these difficult emotional repercussions from experimenting, from holding space for all of these different thoughts. It's starting to really weigh on us, and we need to kind of pick an operation and then go with it. I'll pick a card for the nameless one, and then we'll end this live. Excuse me. My throat is so dry today. Some cards felt the need to reverse themselves just now. Oh, hey, look at that. We already got that card before. So what this tells me is that whether we are satisfied or dissatisfied with how this moment in time is unfolding, it is just a moment in time. This is a good chance to think, okay, if I'm not getting enough, if I really do feel like, I'm being deprived of something, I'm hungry for something, what would enough feel like? Would I know it if I saw it? What should I be pursuing? What should I be focusing on? This is a good way also to combat this kind of like lost in the sauce of the intellectual blade category of thing. Right? There's only so much you can think about it. We need to feel a little bit more. We need to feel like, okay, what does success feel like? What does being enough feel like? How would I know this if I encountered it? And how can I put myself in a position to encounter that feeling, to test it out, right? It's really interesting because, we got the Four of Cups in one deck and then the Five of Cups in another. And this is basically the process of being emotionally satisfied, right? Because either we have enough and we feel good for a moment, but then we get hungry again, it wanes, it disappears, and then we go off and we pursue it, and then either we get it and we're super happy for a minute, but it loses its shine, and then we're kind of sad and we're like, oh, it wasn't enough, what do I do? And then we, focus on the next shiny thing of getting whatever it is that gives us that emotional fulfillment. And then we begin that kind of journey on again. So it's really interesting because this is this is the Moon's decan of Cancer, and then this goes into Mars's decan of Scorpio. And so these are both cards that the decans are ruled by the chart, or not by the chart, by the sign ruler, right? The Moon rules all of Cancer, and this is the Moon's specific decan. Mars rules all of Scorpio, and this is Mars's specific decan. And so it's funny because decans often give that planet like an extra boost or superpower. They give it like a special ability. And it's really fun because the Moon in the Moon's decan of Cancer is like really understanding these natural cycles of hunger and of satisfaction, right? Because the Moon waxes and wanes, and she does this constantly. And so she's always,
starts from nothing, growing, growing, growing at her max fullness, max full moon, and then waning, 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 and then new moon, nothing. And this, one of the reasons why the moon represents our bodies as well as our feelings and our emotions and a bunch of other things in astrology is because those things also are on this natural cycle, right? We're birthed kind of from nothing, from the darkness of the womb and that amazing miracle chemistry. And then grow, grow, grow. Our mom is pregnant, we're delivered. And then we grow, grow, grow. We become big and full at our max peak, and then we wither away back into nothingness, right? Well, no matter how much you eat, right? You're starving, so you eat and eat and eat, and you're full, 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 and then it slowly starts waning, and you get hungry again, and then the cycle continues. So our physical material bodies and the emotions that kind of, I don't know, churn within them are very lunar in that they have these natural cycles where we don't have enough, we strive for more, we get more, we enjoy it for a bit, and then it becomes not enough again, and the cycle continues. And so having this progression from Moon to Scorpio is really like, yeah, because Scorpio is also about emotional desires, but now it's like we're fighting for them, we bleed for them, we engage in destruction for them, right? We're like overcome with this like hunger, this hunger that allows us to pursue, to go out and get what we want. And sometimes that desire can be very painful and very destructive and very corrosive, and sometimes it's very motivating. It drives us, right? It drives us to succeed. Starvation is a very unpleasant experience, to say the least. But that hunger motivates you to go get food, right? To figure out how to make it work as best you can. And so it's really interesting because to have this is sort of saying like we need to really focus on what we need, both physically and emotionally, to feel satisfied, knowing that, yeah, that's going to wane, right? It's not going to be a constant thing. The only constant is that it will constantly cycle, right? We'll constantly be going through these cycles over and over again, but any point in the cycle doesn't last forever. It can't. That otherwise it's not a cycle. So that is that with Pisces. This week we're going to be focusing a lot, I think, on if we're unhappy, why we're unhappy, what would make us happy, what does happiness feel like, and also hunger, right? Desire, what do we want, what do we need, and why do we think we want to need those things? Looks like you've already been thinking about it a lot, but since Jupiter is going direct and Jupiter's your chart ruler, I would expect that to start manifesting externally. And you probably have an easier time figuring out the answers to those questions. Okie dokie. So thank you guys so much for coming to my live. I really appreciate it. I'll be here again next Wednesday. I do think I was able to rein it in a bit. At least the live wasn't 4 hours long this time. So thank you so much for coming. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe, I guess, is what you do on YouTube. And if you, if you have the means or have the moment, check out my offerings on Patreon or any of the offerings I sell at xiahunt.com, where you can buy this beautiful astrology mat or any of these decks that I used, including the Children of Litha, the Children of Ostara, the Nameless One, the Grimoire set, the coins that I make, nice divination coins, just taking a moment to peddle my wares, I guess. Anyway, as awkward as that feels. But yeah, so thank you guys so much for joining me. I really appreciate it, and I hope to see you next Wednesday. So be well.